Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Present.
Councilmember Madera,
Present.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Present.
Councilmember Noble,
Present.
Councilmember Wardiola,
Present.
Councilmember Hurst,
Present.
Councilmember Grimes,
Present.
Councilmember Smith.
Present.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. At the May 4th meeting, Council approved having all public comment occur during citizen communication, except for public hearings. Persons who registered to speak under multiple items will be allowed to speak multiple times. Public hearing testimony will occur during the public hearing portion of the meeting. We will continue this practice unless any council member wants to make a motion to go back to having public comment on resolutions and ordinances separately. At this time, does any council member wish to make such a motion? Seeing none, we will proceed. First item on our agenda is citizen communication. Per council policy, citizen communication is the time on our agenda for the public to address council on business and affairs of the city. The city council is not able to hear any comments at this time on land use matters that are before or may become before council. Please reserve such comments for the appropriate public hearing. As a reminder, council must wait until administrative council business in order to take action in response to citizen communication. The city needed advanced registration in order to participate in citizen communication for this meeting. If you are currently in this meeting to speak during citizen communication, please listen for me to call your name and the clerk will unmute you so you may begin. If you do not respond or are disconnected, you may miss your chance to comment. Please give your name and address for the record and keep your comments limited to 3 minutes. Thank you. First on the agenda is Ryan Seastrom.
Ryan, you're now unmuted and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, council members, and staff. My name is Ryan Seastrom with the Colorado Oil and Gas Association, located at 1800 Glenarm Place in Denver. I appreciate the opportunity to address you all this evening, and I hope you and all of your families have been staying healthy and well. COGA has followed and participated in Commerce City's oil and gas regulatory update for almost 2 years, or a little over 2 years now, and we sincerely appreciate the amount of time that staff and multiple councils have spent discussing the regulations and learning more about Colorado's oil and natural gas industry. However, the regulations have drifted from safely implementing responsible oil and gas development to a de facto ban. While this might be the goal of some, I do not believe that this is the anti-business direction that the city wants to continue pursuing. Several recent discussions have been concerning, and I wish to address a couple of them this evening. Council's new take it or leave it approach is incredibly concerning for a set of regulations that also has no outlined variance process. No other industry or business within the city is held to the same hardline standards, and we request that at least a clear variance process be provided in the code for any future oil and gas operations to account for the unique stakeholder needs and requests. Related to air monitoring, CDPHE and many other studies related to oil and gas emissions have well established that there are no long-term health impacts from oil and natural gas development. Requiring continuous air monitoring for the 25+ year lifespan of a well is unreasonable and unnecessary. COGA suggests that the city follow the direction of the AQCC, which has been studying and analyzing air samples across Colorado for decades. If the city is still unsure about air quality and potential health impacts, the city should pursue a consultation or presentation from a qualified toxicologist who can provide council with a scientifically accurate and unbiased viewpoint of air emissions and health in Colorado. I would again like to stress to council that the decisions you make today will hamper future opportunities and jobs, especially at a time when we need them the most. And it will also have impact on more industries than just ours. We ask that you put politics aside and consider the data that consistently shows that our industry can cooperatively exist within communities. Again, I appreciate your time and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Christy Douglas.
Hello.
Hi, Christy. You're able to give your comment and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
All right, thank you. My name is Christy Douglas. I'm a Commerce City resident. And I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback. I had the opportunity to watch the study session last Monday night. And I found the oil and gas discussion the most interesting. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the council members who supported the 1,000-foot reverse setback. Nothing else like that has been done yet in Colorado. And so I applaud you for being the first to do something like that. Recognizing that the citizens do count. So I really wanted to take the opportunity to let you know that that was appreciated. I did get calls on that and people noticed that you had done that. I also got calls because they've noticed a fracking project that's gone up at E470 and Quebec. And the reason they called me, I guess, is because I've been doing this for the last 10 years and I understand the impacts of fracking on communities and citizens. And they wanted to know if this is going to happen here. And I haven't been to the site. I don't know what it looks like or anything, but I had to tell them that more than likely, yes, that's the case. And these people were pretty upset and distraught. The speaker prior to me is from the industry, and I would like you to be reminded that although they want to say this is just business and they just want to do business here, this is not a business. This is industry. And as far as supplying jobs, why should the people of Commerce City have to make the sacrifice for the jobs of Colorado? There are jobs that could be created in the renewable industry, and that's what we should be focusing on. I think that there are different directions for the city to go. We do not have to let this industry in and become dependent on it. And then when it goes bust, we don't know what to do. So I want you to really consider everything the citizens say, rather than people who are benefiting, who make their money by being in this industry. So again, I thank you for considering the citizens and doing the 1,000-foot reverse setback. And I'd like to thank you for the time for hearing me out tonight.
Thank you. Next on the list is Steve Douglas.
Thank you,
Steve, I'm
counsel.
assuming you're on the same line. You'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Okay, thank you. Steve Douglas, Commerce City, 10970 Unity Parkway. I just want to thank Dylan and the City Council and the city staff for making the Zoom process easier on the website this time. Appreciate that. That's a lot easier. My comments tonight with the oil and gas, especially around the Arsenal presentation, you look at the plumes, they are still present today from 2014, 1994 up until 2014. The plumes continued to move north off the Arsenal, up through the area where Oakwood wants to develop, and into Turnberry and still parts of Eagle Creek. The presentation we had prior years ago only showed the plumes going past Eagle Creek, not up into through from 96 all the way to 104, now present into Turnberry, past Highway 2 on the other side, where there's going to be the Antelope pad, Harlow pad, and the Huron pad. You're also going to have a presentation from Suncor. And so maybe someone could ask the question of Suncor. Suncor has been home to, Commerce City has been home to Suncor for nearly 2 decades now. Are they still receiving tax incentives? Number 2, does Suncor pay out the same sales and use tax as other Commerce City businesses? Or was there agreement, or is that agreement still in place? Number 3, where does Suncor get their water to refine gas into a byproduct? Is the water a first source or a second source? Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is Whitney Connor to speak about Resolution 2020-52.
Whitney,
uh,
yep, we can hear you. Once you start, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Whitney Gustin Connor. I'm with Kids First Healthcare. I want to say thank you very much to the members of the City Council for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm the Executive Director of Kids First Healthcare. I've been with the organization for about a year. I want to take a little time tonight to tell you a few things about Kids First Healthcare and speak in support of the city's interest in the 5th floor of 7190 Colorado Boulevard. So like I said, I've been the Executive Director of Kids First Healthcare for about a year. Some of you may know us already. We've actually been in Commerce City for 42 years now. We were one of the first nonprofits in the country to launch a school-based health clinic. And we currently operate a number of pediatric healthcare sites in Commerce City. We have a standalone clinic on East 69th Ave and Highway 6, where we see kiddos who are ages birth to 21. We also offer support for insurance enrollment for our families in Medicaid and CHIP in particular. We also have clinics inside 4 Adams 14 schools: Adams City High School, Adams City Middle School, Kearney Middle School, and Lester Arnold, where we serve the students of each one of those schools. In Commerce City last year, we saw about 2,500 patients, all residents of Commerce City. There were about 6,300 visits. We administered 3,600 vaccines and helped over 700 kiddos get enrolled in public health insurance. We also dedicate 90% of our budget to direct client services. So that's a little bit about us. As far as our pediatric care services, we provide a full range of children's primary care. So that includes well child visits, sports physicals, vaccines, and some of our clinics are able to offer mental health services and even dental. One of my favorite stories when I was brand new to Kids First was seeing one of our longtime nurse practitioners walking out of the exam room with a little 3-year-old and her mom. And was really struck by that and asked our nurse practitioner about their relationship. And it turns out she had been the provider for that mom years ago. So we've been around long enough and have many nurse practitioners who've been with us for a long time who've started to see generations of kiddos. So like I said, the other thing I wanted to do this evening is to speak in favor of the city's interest in the 5th floor of the ULC building at 7190 Colorado Boulevard, and a special interest in your vision for satellite locations for local nonprofits. We at Kids First have been working with a number of partners, including the local Family Resource Center through Adams, the Early Childhood Partnership of Adams County. We've worked with Adams County itself, Tri-County Health Department, and Kids in Need of Dentistry, KIND, with a vision for that building to be a real community resource hub, a wellness hub for community members who have a variety of needs. We think that Commerce City at the 5th floor, and especially those satellite locations for local nonprofits, would be a great addition to this vision for a community campus and wellness hub. So those were the couple of topics I wanted to cover this evening. I want to say thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Last, we have Ellie Burby, who is also speaking on Resolution 2020-52.
Ellie, you should be able to unmute your microphone and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Ellie Burby. I'm the Executive Director of Kids in Need of Dentistry, also known as KIND, who Whitney just mentioned a few moments ago. My organization is currently located in multiple locations across the Denver metro area, one of those being 4201 East 72nd Avenue in Commerce City. And we serve multiple low-income schools in Adams County and Commerce City specifically as well, with on-site services for low-income students. I want to thank you for the opportunity to address the City Council this evening on the topic of this exciting opportunity to purchase the 5th floor of 7190 Colorado Boulevard for potential nonprofit use. I echo Whitney and her support of this, along with we're speaking tonight on behalf of multiple service organizations in Commerce City that are currently working in alignment together to co-locate in this same building and integrate our services for the benefit of Commerce City residents and underserved families. We want to just vigorously encourage the council to acquire the floor on the South Platte Crossing building. Combined with the opening of the rail station nearby, we believe this acquisition presents a unique opportunity to establish what we believe our vision is really for a highly accessible hub for neighborhood services and such as wellness, such as resource building and other opportunities for residents. As an organization already participating in those opportunities or in those conversations with other Commerce City nonprofit partners, we just believe that the opportunity at this time is very great for that purchase at a time when we know commercial property prices will continue to increase. Right now would be just an excellent opportunity for the county to also be involved in that building and provide more accessible services to the residents. Our organization, just to briefly address what we do, we are a nonprofit that is over 100 years old, and we serve about 12,000 children annually in need of dental care with free or reduced services. We also provide education, nutrition, and how that affects oral health and how oral health affects whole body health. If the City Council members do not already know, dental care is in Colorado leads to roughly 8 million hours of school being lost in our state alone, and that's due to dental pain, and it is the most chronic condition affecting missed school days for children in the country. Above asthma and many other chronic conditions, dental pain is the highest leading culprit of missed school hours. So it is very important to a child's development and to their whole body health. In 2020, KIND treated roughly 576 residents of Commerce City in our dental clinic at the location I mentioned previously, and through more than 700 patient visits. We provided services in that address above, but also on site in Adams County schools that were considered low income through 50% or more free and reduced lunch participants. We are excited about the opportunity to also be part of this building in collaboration with Kids First, and really just wanted to share that vision with the council and urge them to continue to consider being part of this important project for our community. With that, I will conclude. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Members of the public were also able to submit comments online and by mail. No written comments were received by the deadline. If anyone wishes to speak at future council meetings, please check the meeting agenda and city website for information on how to register or submit written comments. Next on the agenda is presentations. We'd like to invite Interim City Manager Tinklenberg to provide an update on the city's overall response to the COVID-19 crisis.
Thank you, Mayor. City staff continues to operate under the 2020 budget reductions. For COVID-19, although the rolling average is dropping once again, cases are continuing to occur. Excuse me. And in Adams County, we're seeing a rate of about 11 to 13. It bounces up and down a little bit per 1,000 people. So far, the confirmed COVID-19 deaths are at 24. So within the city facilities, city staff continues to wear masks, and we're requiring wearing by visitors. We've also published information about a number of programs to assist members of the community. Many of those have been included in the city manager's update the last 2 weeks, so I would refer you to those lists in order to assist people that need help. In terms of staffing, Human Resources is recruiting now to fill vacancies that were frozen until August 1st. And so hopefully we'll be able to fill a number of those staff vacancies that exist. In terms of the reopening plan, we are still staying at the current level 2 in order to maintain safety for employees and the public. With that, I will turn it over to City Attorney, Mr. Sheasley.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Just a quick update on the legal front. Commerce City still is under the Safer at Home regime. Last week, CDPHE issued their 9th amended public health order to implement that. Nothing significant in it other than really adding and integrating some of the governor's more recent pronouncements, including the face covering order and some clarifications about events and bars and restaurants, like the last call requirement. And as everyone knows, the governor's and tri-county mask orders are also currently in effect. Also, late last week, the governor extended his orders regarding property tax payments and authorities of county treasurers there, apparently allowing for another 30-day extension. According to the treasurer's website, they have waived interest on that is due through the end of August. So anybody that is needing to make property tax payments, I don't know the actual specific dates of all the payments, but please confirm that with the treasurer if needed. With that, I will hand it over to Chief Nichols. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. I apologize. I'm having some camera problems. From the PD standpoint, the current mask order that we anticipated would probably cause us a little bit of angst has been, for the most part, relatively, the PD's responded on, I believe, 2 or 3 complaints related to mask orders, and both of those were in private businesses where patrons did not want to wear a mask and the business did not want to serve them, so we were called. So other than that, I don't have anything else, and I'll turn it over to DCM Smith.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Update from the Internal Services Departments this evening. First, from our Community Relations Division, website traffic continues to be very active around Parks, Recreation, and Golf's websites. The most popular post over the last 2 weeks was a public safety post about a missing senior, followed by the 3rd round of business grants. In the city clerk's office, we've had 27 open or CORA open records requests since our last meeting, 267 of those year to date, 18 new business licenses, 251 year to date. And we're planning to do a hybrid city council meeting presentation, which we've scheduled for September 21st for the council. From the IT department, in the last 2 weeks, we've had 136 service tickets opened. Brings our year-to-date total to 1,636. The e-ticketing project with the police department is moving forward with an estimated completion around the end of October of this year. And the IT department has released an RFP for the licensing, land use, and permitting enterprise application. The goal is to have a vendor selected for that project by the beginning of 2021. Been busy in courts. In the month of July, 1,323 cases were disposed. They had 499 front counter customers. They've seen a significant increase in email contacts, 451 customers served through email in July, and 675 customers served via the telephone. There were a total of 775 tickets issued by the police department, mostly by the police department in the month of July. Moving now to human resources, we have 401 budgeted positions, 363 of those full-time positions are filled, leaving 37 vacancies. We have 246 variable hour and seasonal positions. During the last pay period, we had 15 employees use some form of COVID leave, costing a total of $6,425. HR, as Roger mentioned, is in the process of recruitment for 27 of the 37 vacant positions. The city will be submitting its third report of expenditures to the county for the CARES Act funding on the 5th, later this week. And it's estimated that there is about $800,000 remaining of CARES Act funding for the remainder of this year. We have 88 active audits in progress, and 4 audits were postponed due to the COVID-19. That's down from 5 during our last meeting. That concludes my updates. I'm happy to answer any questions. All right, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Tinklenberg.
Thank you, sir. Reporting about the external departments, community development. There's a presentation regarding the comprehensive plan scheduled for next Monday on the 10th. And then there's progress being made on Buckley Crossing development as well as Legato. Also, the 60-unit affordable project continues on at 72nd in Colorado. 104th and Joliet, 1.2 million square feet of industrial facility has completed the first round of the review. And then Third Creek West is currently under review for residential plats, as well as the associated planned unit development. Quick Trip is working on 81st and Tower. That's going to Planning Commission for concept schematic. That will be later this week on the 4th. And then 112th and Highway 85 is also preparing for an annexation and rezoning application. Metro Wastewater conditional use permit is going to the Planning Commission also on the 4th, later this week. And then oil and gas is scheduled for Planning Commission on August 11th. Building code updates, they've conducted 2,793 inspections in July, and so far 530 permits have been processed. The weed ordinance is scheduled for a study session in September. So that's kind of the updates there. Under CDBG, Paint-a-thon contract is being circulated for signatures at this point, and so that'll proceed later. Economic development, COVID-19 business support and recovery grants. They're reviewing 28 applications right now that came in from last week, as well as the business reopening guidelines continue. Those seminars continue to be held by Tri-County Health. Those are on Fridays at 9:30 to 10:30. Adams County reopens small business mini grants. Those are also available through the Chamber of Commerce, and so people should apply through the Chamber. And those are for businesses of 50 or fewer employees, and provide $2,500 for business operations, $1,000 for technology upgrades, and $1,000 for compliance issues. And then also in the city manager's update, we included some information about the state opportunity zone assistance that's available. Turning to Parks, Recreation, and Golf, operations continue at both the Bison Ridge and Eagle Point Recreation Centers. And Bison Ridge has seen 2,347 reservations. And that was basically the last 2 weeks. And then the same thing at Eagle Point is 1,306 reservations. Buffalo Run Golf Course, 19,744 rounds of golf have been played so far this year through July 31. And the food and beverage weekly sales, January through July, are at 372,825. So things started off strong in January, February, and then of course in March dropped in half, almost zero in April, and then it started coming back in May, and now July was a healthy 105,000 in sales, so picked back up. Turning to Public Works, several things. 72nd in Colorado, we're still waiting for Excel to energize those street lights and install the meter. Vasquez Improvements, CDOT is holding a charrette meeting on August 13. And so we will see what comes from that brainstorming session, basically. And then there's going to be a presentation regarding I-270 by the CDOT Executive Director, and that will be on August 8 or August 10, next week as well. Turning to Brighton Road, 104th to 112th, the road rehab and widening design completed phase 1, and anticipate the construction will be in Q4 of this year. And they're still working with Adams County regarding the intergovernmental agreement. 112th Avenue, we're waiting for the schedule for the signal installation. It's dependent on the steel delivery. We've been told that'll be at the end of this month, end of August. So we will see if that happens. And then also there was concern about truck traffic, but that's been routed away from 112th Avenue now at this point. There was an inquiry about the Intel railroad system, TrainFo. Again, we're waiting for traffic to pick back up before the company starts processing data again, once that's back to normal, so to speak. And then they're also working on recruiting some staff vacancy positions. So that's it for external services. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Councilwoman Noble.
Yes, thank you all very much for your reports. Very much appreciated. I'm curious, because we had a kids camp this summer and there were some issues at a camp in the South, it made me curious about whether our kids managed to make it through camp and the camp counselors managed to make it through without any incidents of COVID cases. That's my first question. And my second question is about rent and mortgage assistance that we passed some time ago because unemployment support, the $600 a week ended on Friday. I imagine that there are people who are now entering pretty serious and dire financial straits. So what are we doing there? So both the kids camp and when are we going to see applications for this rent and mortgage assistance that we promised?
Okay, so the answer to the first question is no, there were no cases, thankfully, among the kids or the staff from the camp. And I know that the agreement with Maker is in the process, and I'll ask Jason Rogers to answer your question in more detail. Jason, are you with us?
Yep, he's getting moved over to a panelist right now, Mr. Tinklenberg.
Thank you, Roger. To further expound upon that, the agreement with Maker Housing Partners has been executed. It's been returned. They have shared with me that their program, as it relates to mortgage and rental assistance, will go live on August 5th of this week. With that, the basic outline of the program will allow for a request for back payment, for lack of better words, for mortgage and rental assistance back to March 10th of this year to carry through until October 16th so that we can then still be able to meet our deadline if we have to return any money, knock on wood. It's all with intents and purposes for Maker, what they've shared with us, that they will expend any and all dollars that we presented to them. That's their goal, that's their hope. But we will allow for, based on the program, a back payment or a back request to March 10th, and the program should be going live with an announcement and coordination with our team here shortly as well on August 5th. Thank you, Council.
So August 5th is Wednesday?
Yes, ma'am, that is what Maker has shared with us.
Okay, so hopefully there's somehow we're getting the word out. I know that people miss out on grants because no matter how hard we try, or loans, that they just don't find out about it when they're in small businesses. I encountered that last week. So I really, when will they have to get their applications in by if it goes live on Wednesday?
So they've actually have allowed for people to start submitting information to them as we've have had touch base with a number of different community interested groups, from churches to nonprofits to even landlords themselves. We've actually started directing them to Maker Housing Partners, to being able to get the necessary information so that they can start submitting prior to the hard deadline when the program goes live. I will say Maker Housing Partners has engaged a marketing and strategic firm. I don't know particularly the name of that, but can get that for you. That is working on a very comprehensive approach of how they will share information into the community. That being said, we have begun preparing, I'll say, a article within our connected newsletter as well, being able to present the availability of the program on behalf of Maker Housing Partners as well. So we are trying to push the message and have been trying to push the message, even while still constructing the necessary improvements over the past month and a half.
So how much money is available? I would hate to see, as much as people need it, it would seem that the fair way to handle is that people are able to apply all at the same time, as opposed to some people having an inside track and coming in earlier. So how much money are we actually giving away, and is it until it runs out? Is it a specific amount? Is it as much as they're asking for? What are the circumstances surrounding this?
So we have presented them with $500,000, which is obviously inclusive of administrative fees for them to be able to administer the program on behalf of the city. So for that $500,000, they will then start outside the administrative fee, apply that to those who submit for assistance, either as a single property owner, as a tenant that is within a leased property, who's working with a landlord and such. When that money runs out, the overall plan as well is that, given we have the COVID CDBG funds that we have received from the Housing and Urban Development federal government, we will then take those monies, which were in the amount of $200,000, and then backfill once they have extinguished the $500,000 or less.
Is there a limit? Is there any parameters on how much? I'm sorry, perhaps I'm not making my questions clear tonight.
If you can ask me, are you asking how many months they can seek assistance with?
Well, someone may be renting for $10,000 a month and it's $50,000 for them, while someone else may be renting for $1,000 a month and it's $5,000 for them. Is there any limit on how much someone can receive of the $500,000?
Based on our understanding of the eligibility parameters and award criteria, there is no established cap for what an individual may request. Obviously, it will be dependent upon the availability of funds. But once again, we have, I suspect, and would have to check with the finance department, have wired that money wholly to Maker Housing Partners to make it available for their use.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Wadiola.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Rogers or Mr. Tinkelberg, are we going to get a report on how the money was used? My concern from hearing this conversation is that we get landlords that will use the money, and how do we know that they're not using it rightly, or the people that really need it are not utilizing it? Nowhere in the conversations before this did we hear that. I was under the assumption, and maybe this was just me, that single residents could apply for this money because it's going directly to our residents. Now what we're hearing is you could have a management company in Commerce City and say, hey, we're going to alleviate X amount, get $100,000 worth of that, and only help a certain amount, where that $100,000 could have helped 100 of our residents with $1,000. So what are we doing to check and balance this, and not I mean, I'm just a little concerned about this process and how some people, if you're not in the know, I guess, you didn't get the fast track, right? Now you have to wait till August 5th when some landlords and some organizations are already putting their applications in or getting ready, while the simple resident who's working 80 hours and still not making it won't find out until August 5th. How is that fair to our residents who are not on those lists?
So I will try to step through and answer your questions as I understood them. I would say, as it relates to the opportunity for the landlord, when we had to come back through with making an adjustment to the resolution to allow a greater AMI, staff did bring at that point in time an opportunity that it would also be inclusive of a landlord being able to submit on behalf of tenants that have self-attested to being impacted by COVID. Regardless, they will have to go through, Maker Housing Partners will have to go through a reporting structure for their ability to administer those funds that require them to meet certain federal requirements and other requirements from an auditing standpoint. And part of their parameters as part of the audit will be the review of their eligibility parameters and how they've been able to meet such criteria. Any and all participants of this will have to demonstrate, even their tenants will have to demonstrate through self-attestation that they have been impacted by COVID. That being either reduced hours, that being either impacted through actually having lost their job. And we have ensured that that information to an simpler level is part of their audit, part of the report out to the city, but also part of the eligibility parameters and part of the application process, so that we are covering that basis and making sure that money is being used appropriately and accordingly, and which we can then demonstrate if we're even audited for those purposes, as we are, that we have that information at the tip of our hands to make sure that we're demonstrating the compliance as well.
Thank you.
As it relates to the, I would say, the marketing and strategic aspect of trying to get the word out, I would say we are probably in a better position than, even though, once again, they're still trying to build it up. There's been a lot of connections that we've been trying to make as those who have reached out and trying to push it out. And since we're not administering that, we have to be respectful to an extent as well from a staff standpoint, so that we don't overburden them, so that when they can actually start to disperse those funds, we then run into a bottleneck, and now we have the other issue. So we are trying to work very strategically with them on, once they have all of the application, once again, the portals for online submittal, the documentation that we can then push out, that we can help them push out, and then start to make connections, once again, in the broader community, it will be a full push. And starting to make those connections with our community relations team, with their marketing strategic firm as well. So even though I know it may seem as though that we've been a little bit of slow step, I think we've been a little bit more strategic and surgical, so that we can be effective when we do hit the ground and can actually expend those funds.
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
You're welcome, sir.
Any other questions for staff on the COVID response? Thank you, everybody, for your report. Very informative. Appreciate all the hard work as always. Next on the agenda is the Oil and Gas Monthly Update. Will Dominic Martinelli please provide the Oil and Gas Monthly Update?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I will be giving the monthly oil and gas update presentation here. So the first slide, with the city oil and gas permit applications, we still are in the same position that we were last month. There's 7 applications that have been deemed complete. There's 1 application, Condor, that does not have the information to begin processing. Since we've included this information here, we have not received that additional information. So we're still at 7 applications that are under review at the moment. And I'm going to go through these slides here. City permits deemed complete. This is unchanged from last month. All this information, review schedule, spacing applications, Form 2, Form 2A, and state activity has remained the same since the last monthly update. Some general updates, again, we're waiting on resubmittals from Extraction Oil and Gas on their permit applications. As interim city manager mentioned during his presentation, that there is a hearing scheduled that had been finalized for the oil and gas updates. August 11th was the Planning Commission hearing. On Monday, September 21st, City Council will read the oil and gas updates for the first time, and then it could be adopted as early as Monday, October 5th. Providing some updates on the COGCC rulemaking process. So the city submitted its formal pre-hearing statement for the COGCC mission rulemaking. So it highlighted a number of areas and concerns and areas of support from the city. This was based on the feedback received from council during the June 8th study session, as well as staff analysis and outside special counsel analysis. And this is just generally speaking for the public. The general public comment deadline in the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission rulemaking. So this is the mission change rulemaking, which contains a number of the provisions that come from the implementation of Senate Bill 181. The COGCC is accepting public comments until August 14th. And there is a link provided in the presentation to submit those comments. Following that deadline, the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission will be holding the rulemaking between August 24th and September 10th. Some additional information. So there's a study session planned on August 10th, so next Monday, with Colorado Department of Public Health and environmental staff. There's a number of folks that work specifically the air quality monitoring and some of the technologies behind that are going to give an update on general science behind air quality monitoring and available technologies, as well as the interface between local and state air quality efforts and how those two can interplay. Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment has also been exploring the potential for additional air monitoring within the core areas of Commerce City. So between the interface of industrial and residential land uses and looking at what some potential health outcomes might be from that. So part of this presentation on August 10th is going to be talking a little bit about what CDPHE has been looking at and some potential items surrounding that. So additionally, staff is working to provide council additional information from the arsenal and the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment on the plume. So this was an item that came up during the last study session. We did include the speaker series presentation on the plumes as part of this oil and gas monthly update to address any immediate questions. We're working to try and get additional background and information and potential report to come from the arsenal and the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment on arsenal issues as it relates to oil and gas. So other items. So the city also joined as a party to the Air Quality Control Commission Regulation Rulemaking 7. So as this has been mentioned a number of times, the Air Quality Control Commission is the state agency that's tasked with passing air quality regulations and following Senate Bill 181 and addressing a number of specific issues with oil and gas. There's this proposed Air Quality Control Commission Rulemaking 7. So it's going to be looking at ambient air quality monitoring, flowback controls, expanded reporting, and increased controls on natural gas engines. So these are going to deal with a lot of the air issues that do come from oil and gas sites. And this is where the topic of continuous monitoring is going to be looked at from the state level. The city is overall supportive of increased monitoring requirements and any regulations that increase public health, safety, welfare, and environmental protections. And the city has provided a pre-hearing statement to the Air Quality Control Commission on this rulemaking as well. So additional information on Suncor Refinery. There was a plant alarm that sounded on July 22nd that was determined not to be associated with any operational or safety issues that occurred. And since the last monthly update, there have been 0 self-reported air quality exceedances by Suncor. And then additional background on the Suncor supplemental environmental process update and timeline. So as you can remember from a few study sessions ago, staff has talked about the Suncor settlement funds, the $2.6 million that is being made available to jurisdictions and municipalities and nonprofits that are generally in proximity to the refinery as a result of the enforcement order that occurred. So the city has explained in depth a little bit about how They plan to engage the public and receive feedback and potentially submit for some of these funds and identify some potential projects. We had talked a little bit about timeline and what we could look at and how that eventually could play out. So I believe Councilmember Hurst a couple months ago mentioned developing some form of web page or website to take in ideas from the public on how some of these funds could be used. So following that, staff prepared a website on the city's website to be able to provide feedback to the city and essentially say, where are some areas that these funds could potentially be used, and what considerations does the public have towards the city's potential application for these funds? So it includes basic information describing the SEP process and a survey link for providing ideas to the city. So essentially saying and providing some background and context, what is this process? How's it occurring? How have these funds historically been used in the past for other enforcement orders? What are sort of the guidelines and the rails to help people form more aligned and in-depth feedback for the city to be able to use? It also explains exactly how the public's feedback would be evaluated and considered as part of this process. So essentially, when we're talking about what the city is planning to submit, whether it's one submission, multiple submissions, having that be a community-led process. So taking ideas that have the greatest community consensus and feedback, but also the most likelihood for successful selection and implementation would eventually move forward. So we're hoping to get that up as early as tomorrow morning and then run that for a full month to September 4th. And then within that, hold a town hall on Thursday, August 13th to answer any questions from the general public about the process, what are some ideas that could be considered, and then facilitate a discussion on some potential projects and ideas that community members have that can eventually inform how the city moves forward with its submission. And then from that, there's a study session that's scheduled with council on Monday, September 14th to discuss that feedback from the webpage and the town hall efforts, and then an analysis of common and consistent themes that come from those public responses. So kind of looking at the aggregate data, saying what kind of themes are we seeing? Are people more concerned about projects that address air quality? Is coming up with green infrastructure or water quality improvements, something that the community really focused on? Community health initiatives, where is the overlap, and based on that, where could we potentially move from? And then provide a staff recommendation on different types of project feasibility, and then ultimately determine what projects should be submitted to the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment for consideration. And then just to provide a little bit of update on the state process, as you know, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment is going to be reviewing all the project proposals from local governments and from the community. And essentially, they're forming their own evaluation committee through their separate community engagement process. And that committee that eventually makes the decision on how these funds are allocated needs to have a decision made by December 31st. And then still there's some undetermined dates in September, October, or when the official RFA is going to be released. So moving into this section of the presentation, this is directly from Suncor's written update. So we've been, in addition to information that's hosted on the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment's website, Suncor provides a monthly written update, and staff moving forward is going to actually take some of this information and display it as part of the presentation for public viewing. So this first bullet actually occurred today. So the refinery began the stages of reopening Plant 2. So they've been coordinating with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, and they've conducted additional preventative maintenance, upgrades, and training while the plant was shut down. And Suncor states that they plan to notify stakeholders in the community prior to starting the unit up again. The notification was sent today that they are planning to, they're in the process of opening that up. So a little bit more updates they provided on the Sand Creek activities. So they've continued work to remediate the issue, and that's been ongoing work, which included a minor diversion of Sand Creek and further contaminant of the area where the sheen was observed. partial dewatering of the contaminant area is needed, and then removing impacted soil and sediment, analyzing soil samples, and then in the coming weeks, Suncor will be working to obtain CDPA's approval for proceeding with the backfilling and restoration activities. So they provided a couple figures showing exactly where that work is occurring. And then during the month of June, the refinery experienced 4 events that were self-reported and 7 environmental exceedances, 5 related to air emissions, 2 from the sulfur recovery unit malfunction that caused the tail gas incinerator to trip offline, and then 3 were due to taking the tail gas unit offline for critical repairs, and then the 2 items regarding the soil releases. And then you can see their comparison between environmental performance from 2019 versus 2020 to this point. Some additional information and updates that they provided on PFAS. So PFAS is the larger group of synthetic chemicals which contain PFOS and PFAS. This is the firefighting foam or the forever chemicals that are essentially come from firefighting foam and have the potential to contaminate groundwater. 70 parts per trillion is the health advisory threshold for combined PFOS and PFAS concentrations. And then based on testing that occurred since August 2018, Suncor determined that those compounds were present both upstream and downstream of the refinery in varying levels below and above the EPA health advisory of 70 parts per trillion. So they provided some figures and numbers for June 2020. Upstream of the refinery, those are between 65 and 84 parts per trillion, 67 and 72 along the refinery and upstream, and then downstream of the Suncor outfall between 72 and 78 parts per trillion. So Suncor does not currently use any firefighting foam containing PFAS during firefighting training events, and they've replaced older Class B foam with a new foam that complies with new EPA regulations. They provided an update on the settlement agreement. So regarding the community notification, this was covered separately within a House bill. But as part of their settlement agreement negotiations, Suncor is in the midst of evaluating how, what, and when Suncor shares information and data about the refinery's operations. And they're continuing this work for the remainder of 2020 and into 2021, and expects to execute an important phase of the community notification project in mid to late August, when they'll be conducting stakeholder consultation and community engagement around this specific issue. They're going to be having a third-party consultant host this in both English and Spanish, and the deadlines that they have are listed there. They did provide some other updates on their employees donating food and grocery and hygienic supplies, and they made a similar donation to We Don't Waste, and information about the Suncor Scholarship Presentation, which will be given to Marina Guevara Galvan during the 14er Fest, which is going virtual on August 10th from 7 to 8 p.m. Council did ask during the last study session to bring back additional items regarding air quality monitoring. But before we get into that, I wanted to pause here and just ask if we have any questions on the actual oil and gas monthly update presentation.
Any questions for Mr. Martinelli? Councilwoman Ellen Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Martinelli, for your presentation. I have a few questions. First question, for the town hall meeting on the 13th, how were residents notified to be involved?
So our communications staff has established a communications plan for notifying, and I believe it involves a significant reach of social media posts and outreach, and I'd have to follow up on some of the more specifics, but it's a lot of the general communication tools that we used for the oil and gas town hall. So a lot of social media, newsletter, I'm sorry, not the actual newsletter that's delivered, but the email notifications that people can sign up for. There's a couple different avenues that they've identified to alert the public.
Okay, because, you know, as I mentioned before, that's a serious concern. I think it's important for the community to have a voice and be involved. And with this occurring within 10 days, is that enough time to, with 60,000 plus residents in Commerce City to have a voice, in 10 days, that's pretty quick approaching. But I don't know, T, I just want to show City Council, I don't know if everyone can see this, but Commerce City Public Works did an excellent, I don't know if anyone can see this, a little flyer that Public Works put out for road work, and something, I don't know if everyone can see that, but something this important, I think they put it on every door. So something like that, is that something that staff can possibly look into for these town hall meetings? Because like I said, a lot of residents don't have social media, and so I think it's important that they get a chance to know, and like I said, possibly these door hangers as well.
We can certainly work with our communication staff to figure out some additional ways to get the word out about the meeting. I think one of the ways that we were really looking at this is, so the town hall is intended to be sort of a forum for community questions, but also to facilitate a larger discussion. We do want to caveat that the town hall meeting is not in lieu of actually filling out the form that the website links to. So one of the ways that we're actually going to capture this feedback and this information from the public is through the website and through the online form that folks can submit for if they have a specific project idea or if they don't. So if they have just items that they want the city to consider, but they don't have a specific idea for a project, we do want to communicate that that's the most useful way and essentially what the city is looking for in terms of feedback. So we actually are thinking of using the town hall as part of that tool to help advertise and enhance the form and the website. But we will certainly look to see if there's some additional ways that we can increase engagement and increase notification of the actual meeting itself.
Okay, thanks. And like I said, if staff can follow up with these little nice door hangers, because they are in English and Spanish. One side is English and the other side is Spanish, because like I said, I can't stress enough how many residents don't have social media, and I think it's really important that we include everyone and get the word out. Thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank you.
Councilman Hurst.
Thank you. Thanks, Dominic, for the presentation. Can I ask, I just want to make sure we all have our correct expectations on the SEP process. Can you reiterate, what the city's ability is on the final outcome of the SEP process? Because it's my understanding that the city might be able to have some input or might have one board member of the committee that's going to decide how the SEP gets spent, but we really don't have the overall decision-making ability in this. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, I can provide just a general overview of how that process works. So essentially what happened is once Suncor and CDPHE established their settlement for the continued air quality violations that have occurred over the last couple of years, they funneled that process through the SEP process. So this is the process that has been in place way before Suncor for any of that. This is typically how CDPHE establishes violation money and distributes it to public good for a number of uses. So when the Firestone incident happened in 2017 with the flow line, there was a settlement that occurred with that. There's been other settlement processes that occurred over time. So what they're doing with this one is CDPHE is conducting their own separate engagement process with the community. And what their goal is they have to form an evaluation committee that's comprised of one member from Suncor, one member from CDPHE, and then community members from the public. So to answer your direct question, there's not going to be any sort of city staff representatives on the selective board, but there may ultimately at the end be some members of the community in Commerce City itself that are actually on the approving board. So the application is open to governmental entities. So that could be Commerce City, Adams County, Denver, other local governments in the area, as well as 501c3 nonprofits. So essentially, we're still waiting on this piece, is essentially the guidelines that CDPHE releases and says, all right, here's your script. Here's what the state is looking for in its potential project ideas and submissions, and then asks those local governments and nonprofits to submit responses to its question. So what we're talking about here is how the city plans to respond to their request. But again, there's not going to be any sort of city staff representative that's on that selection committee, or nor will all of those funds potentially go directly to Commerce City. It might go to other jurisdictions. It might go to nonprofits. We're not sure exactly how that's going to go, but that's kind of an outline of how that process will work.
I appreciate that explanation. One of the reasons I was asking that question is for the exact reasons you just kind of laid out, is that there's no guarantee that this money comes back to us. So I want to make sure we have the appropriate expectations going into this, but also that we put out, and this might not be directed at city staff, this might be directed at the rest of council as well. Anybody in our community that wants to have a say in this, we put maximum effort into being involved in that decision-making process. And so if we have these, own internal city outreach, whether we do public meetings, try to get public input back on what good ideas are, we need to make sure that we talk about that expectation of, we are going to do our best to have input into this decision making, but it's not city council, it's not city staff that has final say on how the SEP gets spent. And so we need to try to have some influence on that and get on that so we can bring those dollars back to Commerce City, but wanted to make sure that it was very clear that the meeting on the 13th, the ideas that are submitted are just going to be submitted. There's a lot of unknowns on how they're going to be selected at the very end, and we should do our best to make an impact on how they get selected.
Councilman Harris, one final thing that I wanted to add to your last statement that I think also provides some color is, since SEP is an ongoing framework that CDPHE uses for other ongoing events in the future, what they've told me is that even if we submit a project idea that ultimately doesn't get selected, they keep a database and a data bank of all of the project submissions that they've received. And while there might be one that was runner-up that didn't get selected that time, they've actually gone back and even selected projects that, or like gone back and looked in other ways that they can incorporate those projects. So it's really, really an idea generating exercise. So it's kind of coming up with these projects and these ideas, and even if they don't get selected during this funding cycle, they might be available for future.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing to note, because I knew about that as well, and that's what I was I should have said a little more clearly, is they already have a lot of ideas that they're looking at and they're preparing to discuss. And so that's why I'm not saying let's temper our expectations, but understand the process as a whole before we go into this, because we don't want to have this expectation from the community that August 13th meeting is going to decide how we're going to spend that money. It's absolutely not. It's going to be a very small piece of a much larger conversation that we don't have a whole lot of control of.
Councilwoman Noble.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Dominic. And I'd like to follow up on that and also say that I believe that if two different organizations suggest air quality monitoring, for example, the city, and then a nonprofit organization or even another community, they can choose among them. I suppose they might ask everyone to work together, but it doesn't necessarily mean that because we had the idea that we get chosen as well. So that does complicate it a bit. I would also like to ask if we could be provided with the pre-hearing statements on both mission change and air quality that the staff prepared.
Absolutely.
Okay, and maybe put those up on the website as well.
Definitely.
Okay, great, thank you. You noted that you would have more information in the future on the plume from the arsenal. And one of our speakers commented on that as well. But when I raised this, I was also talking about the earthquake hazards and the 1600 earthquakes at the Arsenal site and what could potentially trigger that again, whether we have a fault, et cetera, that is in this area. So it wasn't the plume alone. It was all of the hazards involved with the arsenal that we could potentially unleash. Okay, is that,
Yeah, noted.
that help? Okay, and then my final thing is about, oh, wait. I don't know. Are we doing, we're doing the air quality, the portion of the air quality monitoring in another segment, is that correct, Dominic?
Yeah, I just paused here to kind of break
Okay.
up the presentation.
All right. Okay, great. Then I would also like to say that regarding Suncor and their low emissions, that's really great news. But because one plant has been shut down for quite some time now that it's going back online, this will be a really interesting period to see whether these self-reported emission violations tick back up again because they may have to do with that plant in particular. Anyway, it will be interesting to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Allen Thomas.
Yes, Mr. Martinelli, I did just want to clarify from your PowerPoint presentation, because the way it sounded, the residents that do live around that area on the 13th, they will have a voice as to what is going to happen. And, you know, because it sounded like you're saying they won't, but on 13th, they are part of their ideals. They will be a voice, right? On the 13th.
Yeah, so for the town hall, that's absolutely the point of that meeting is we, as it pertains to the city's response to CDPHE's request, we want it to be a community-led and driven process. We want to get the community's feedback, and specifically from the residents that live within that area as well. What we were discussing with Councilman Hurst was more specific to the actual selection process that the state and the formal evaluation committee holds. So there's two separate topics there, and as we talk about the town hall, that we're making sure that we're getting the community's feedback for how the city responds, for what we have control over.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, please move on to air monitoring.
Right. So following the last study session, we did have one more item that we needed to resolve. But before we jump into that, I just wanted to highlight the feedback that council has provided on air monitoring. So on June 22nd, council provided feedback during the study session for the two text changes that are highlighted above. So the plan shall also describe how the operator will conduct continuous monitoring. And then there was overall consensus from the council to change the next business day to 1 hour in terms of operator notifying the city of a canister pull. So that's the feedback we do have at the moment. The one area that we still need to discuss and receive council consensus on is the discussion regarding duration of air monitoring. So I do want to provide a little bit of a background and update here. So the way that the draft was originally presented in March 10 was that continuous monitoring may not cease until 3 years have passed from the date of the last well drilled on the site has entered the production phase, unless any use defined within 215266 6A, so that's the setback requirement, is within 1,000 feet of the edge of the well site. In such instances, continuous monitoring may be required until all wells are plugged and abandoned. So the feedback that we're looking from you to kind of move forward and get this draft ready for Planning Commission, the one outstanding item that we need council feedback on is what shall the duration of air quality monitoring be? And I do want to note that the original staff recommendation of 3 years was based on historic production data from oil and gas well sites, that the majority of production occurs during the first 3 years of development, and then starts to taper off significantly from that point. And from the expertise and the research that we did, this this is the prime window to conduct that monitoring and to essentially ensure that everything is going as planned and as anticipated. And then once production starts to drop and reduce in size significantly, then that's when that exception could be removed. But we originally had that if you're within 1,000 feet of any of those uses, that might be a scenario where homes or residences are relatively close, and it may justify continuous monitoring for the lifetime of the well. And as you all know, in the last study session that we had, you all provided staff direction to incorporate a 1,000-foot reverse setback. So based on staff's reading of what the new draft will be, is theoretically there shouldn't be any new uses within 1,000 feet of a well site unless they go through the council approved modification process. So there is a little bit of an inconsistency there in terms of the 1,000-foot delineation, because there's not going to be an instance where anything encroaches on that unless there's some sort of variance granted by council. To tie this in with the Air Quality Control Commission rulemaking, their proposed Rule 7 has continuous monitoring for the first 6 months of production. And in the pre-hearing statement that Commerce City provided to the Air Quality Control Commission, it recommended adopting 3 years as that delineating line. So that being said, we can open it up for discussion. If you have any specific questions for staff on this, we're happy to answer.
Any questions for staff on this item? Seeing no questions or comments, please proceed.
So one last thing before we go through and council provides consensus to staff and direction to staff. Staff's recommendation is to establish the air monitoring, the continuous monitoring requirement for 3 years after the commence of production.
Councilwoman Noble.
This makes sense and then removing the 1,000 feet. But I have a question about the previous page where you name canisters. I don't think that that's the only way of monitoring air quality. Is it?
So canisters are a different item. So this is talking about, so you have continuous monitors, which aren't going to be able to get in as specific depth as a canister sample will. So canister samplers are going to be able to cover every sort of type of pollutant, benzene, all those, basically all the significant toluene, all those really in-depth chemicals that continuous monitoring might not be able to accomplish. So these are in the field typically deployed when there's a specific spike or a continuous monitor of notes. So let's say that there's a continuous monitor on site that determines an increase beyond a certain threshold point. That notifies folks to know that there may be an issue and that a canister needs to be deployed to figure out what the concentrations were and what the percentages were and that type of thing. So it's a more specific and more detailed application that is different from the continuous piece. Does that make sense?
Okay, as long as we're not locking ourselves in with the type of equipment that can be used. That was my only concern from your previous slide, just before this one. And may I ask when I can bring up a couple of other questions that are not regarding air monitoring? May I do so at the end of this presentation?
So I would defer to
Mayor Huseman?
Yeah,
Mayor Huseman?
Nobody else has requested to speak, so just go ahead.
Okay. I noted that in the presentation that the staff wrote that other items that had not been discussed would just be postponed until another time. But we did not make a decision on permit transferability, and that's noted in the document. And I have a question in particular about financial assurances. And maybe Mr. Sheasley can explain it since Matt Sura and Matt Hayter aren't here. But it says in the document that, and we didn't get this in our slides, you have to actually read the draft to see this, that the cash bond, which is the surety bond, is returned upon the end of completion of fracking or end of completion or fracking. That's the same thing, and start of production. The bonds are typically used for reclamation as well. So I'm really curious as to what the thinking is in ending the bonds after a well goes into production. Why are we no longer protected after that point?
Ms. Noble, I'm not familiar with that specific provision enough to speak to it now, but I'll follow up and get back to you on that and to the whole council.
Actually, I'm a little worried that we're going to have to vote the draft regulations up or down as opposed by section. So this is actually quite important. It's in 15. Let me see. I have this written down. Oh, here it is. It's section 15, B3 and 4 of the draft rules under financial assurance. And I might add, it's the same language that's in the regional operators agreement. And it specifically says, and it talks further about, yes, I think we do need to have further discussion on it before this goes before the Planning Commission. And if we don't have anyone here who can address it, then I'm afraid it probably needs to be delayed in some fashion, because we can't have the taxpayers burdened with any costs.
I'd be happy to provide a response on that is when I can read the document and understand it in its entirety. You're correct. Much of the language originated from the operator agreement and was enhanced to provide additional protections, especially in light of Senate Bill 181. As to voting on individual sections, I believe that the process over the last year for the prior council and then when this council came in, especially in going through specific items, was intended to be the review of item by item, understanding that each word of the draft was not provided in the presentation. The intention was to go through the regulation on a piece by piece basis. Voting on any item separately as the whole council would be unworkable because of the way it works as a whole, unless specific sections are taken out and voted on later. However, it is entirely council's discretion to delay this further to have discussions on specific sections.
I would hope that we can. This is really actually critical. It was not on a slide that we looked at in the PowerPoint, right? In the PowerPoint information, I happen to have met with someone who worked with the EPA for 28 years, working on financial assurances for the fossil fuel industry on federal lands. And so in the process of going back and pulling out the financial assurances information, I discovered that these clauses were in this article and this section 15. And it really puts the city in a very poor position in terms of financial protections. And in particular, it puts taxpayers in a bad position as well.
Susan, one quick note on that. So we were in the process of essentially getting the revised draft ready for Planning Commission and doing all that and generating staff report and that type of thing. We will go back and take a look. So legal and community development to take a look at that provision. So the concern that you're highlighting, we had stated in the study session that the bond amount and in there is in place to cover not only the drilling and completions phase, but the development phase. So if there's retooling that needs to be done to address that provision, that certainly can be accomplished as well.
Right, because there's nothing in there, Dominic, either for reclamation. So the 86,000, for example, that the COGCC has been talking about has been about reclamation as well. So we don't have any bonding for reclamation according to the language of Section 15. The money goes back to the operator 10 days after they request it, once production begins.
I can clarify, I've read it now. I do believe that the intention was to cover financial setbacks during that period of time as defined in that ordinance, not to cover reclamation, a period of reclamation following that production. I believe the intention was that once the site is underway, it could be covered by other either state protections, but certainly not having a security to cover reclamation in the event of a problem occurring during that period or at the end of the well's life. So that is correct. If that is something that council would want to include, that is something that could be provided. There is another section following that requiring potentially in the discretion of the city a performance security. This is, and I may be looking at an old draft, Dominic, please forgive me, to ensure compliance with mitigation requirements and the BMP document. And so there is a potential to put some additional surety requirement on an operator at that point. But it is not a standing mandatory requirement, as is that financial assurance provision.
It also talks about costs incurred by the city following a financial setback. There should be no reason for the city to incur any costs. Those should all come out of the bond. And at this point, we are not covered for reclamation. And there are certainly plenty of facilities on these sites for these multi-well paths that would be left behind and are not downhole issues. They're not about plugging. These are other problems that are left behind. So I think that it's an oversight that we need to include bonding. Therefore, the bonding should be continuous for the life of the well. If there is transferability, which we haven't necessarily talked about, how that bond is handled as well. There's a lot of financial assurance questions that have been raised that put the city in a precarious position. And I, for one, am quite concerned.
All right, so noting all of that, do we want to proceed forward? And we did provide a recommendation on the air quality monitoring. Do we want to receive direction from council on how to proceed forward with the continuous monitoring? Or any additional questions that pertain to that topic?
Any additional comments or direction for staff regarding the air monitoring portion of this discussion? I will take no comments as a consensus that everybody agrees with staff's recommendations. Seeing no requests for comments, we'll proceed with that, Mr. Martinelli.
All right, thank you.
Mayor, if I may add, just in response to Councilwoman Noble's discussion around permit transferability, I would like to just note for council again that on July 21st, we did discuss oil and gas permit transferability, and the outcome was consensus support for staff's proposed language as drafted with two additions. One was looking at a permit fee somewhere between the range of 10 to 15%, which does not necessarily impact the land development code update, does impact our adopted fee schedule, and would have to make accommodating adjustments to capture that request by council. And at the same time, council had accepted staff's additional inclusion of being able, myself or successor of interest, as these applications come in over time, preparing a report that demonstrates compliance and conformance and a determination whether to grant permit transferability or not. and that report would be prepared by the director and then sent to the city council.
Councilwoman Noble.
Thanks very much. You know, I have gone through both sets of these to look at the summaries of the decisions that we made over the course of 3 meetings. And it has been very difficult to read these. They're looking for the same language. You can't do a search. In some cases, it says support. In some cases, it says consensus. In other cases, it says something else. It's really challenging to read it. That is, in looking at one set of slides, that is not how it reads on permit transferability. There may have been a subsequent decision made, but that's not made clear. Without having information before us that shows the progress that we made over the course of 3 meetings, it's not only is it difficult for us, but it's difficult for any resident who's trying to keep track of what's happening here as well. I requested a summary last week, and instead we got 2 sets of PowerPoints with notes on the PowerPoints. It would be great if we could actually have a summary. I don't know when this will be ready for the Planning Commission, but I do believe that we need to have another look at this on August 10th because of questions regarding what is stated on these different slides. We really probably in administrative council business, I'm going to raise the question of having minutes or some sort of proviso that provides us with a summary after every study session so that we don't find ourselves in this fix as we are right now. So I hope that everyone will be interested in going down that path because this is way too critical for there to be any questions about what decisions were made and what the discussion was. Thank you.
I appreciate that, council member. And I would say as well, you know, given with where we're at within the process, staff is preparing a report for the Planning Commission, which obviously will discuss the recommendations that were received and are being captured within the updates to the exhibits of the Land Development Code update. We are within a process, and within that process, those documents will be made available, which will capture and be able to refine with what we received from council, and obviously still be presented to council for your continued review and discussion. Ultimately, as we bring it forward to city council through the public hearing process. Once again, within the public hearing process, there's still the opportunity for council to weigh in, to further refine, to revise, and or to request for additional discussion, determination, and provision of additional feedback as we bring forward. So I would say, you know, as I humbly respectfully share with you all, that staff report for Planning Commission and the update to the Land Development Code exhibits will be the summation of the recommendations that we have received, not only from the council, but also what we have heard through our public draft process that we brought forward to council as well as it gets brought into a singular document for consideration. So I would humbly respectfully share that with you all as council as well.
Any other comments for staff on this? Seeing none, we'll look forward to taking this up during administrative council business.
Mr. Mayor, I had my hand up.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Rogers, could you also clarify for us when the document goes forward to the Planning Commission, will it show our language or consensus, or will it also show what the staff recommended?
So it will show all comprehensive revisions, updates that we have brought forward. So it will show what has been proposed by staff at the March 10th, and then follow on June 8th draft. in addition to the updated provisions by council that we have discussed on the 22nd, 21st, and ultimately the 27th being the final topic, which was reverse setbacks. So the exhibits will have all red lines that have been brought forward, plus, once again, council's additional requests for inclusion and or change.
So potentially the planning commission could choose everything that the staff did and not anything that the city council did. Is that correct?
I'm going to have to understand what you may mean by that, ma'am. Because once again, I would look at this as a uniform proposal going forward to planning commission, and they obviously will review all requested changes and make a determination. There will be no, I will say, delineation between staff and council with respect to that, but we will obviously provide them with information and respond to questions or comments as they may come. But a red line is a red line that is brought forward to planning commission.
Mr. Rogers, if I could clarify, I believe for something so large, it's likely that what council would see is the draft that goes to planning commission and then a list of recommended changes from the planning commission. So you would likely see the document that is going forward as you have reached consensus. There will be note of staff recommendations on some items continuing, but the planning commission is just a recommendation body. And so they will give you a list of recommendations potentially as to changes on those items. And so council will then choose from those recommendations whether they want to take them or not take them, and they would take them up as amendments to the ordinance when they receive it.
When do we receive a clean copy? It's very difficult to read all of the redlining, and we're unable to remove the redlining because we only receive these as PDFs.
I believe they can be provided as a clean copy in addition to a red line.
That is correct.
Okay, that would be very helpful if we could then compare both documents. Please do. Thank you.
And if I may share, city attorney, and also in the furtherance of that, is our intent and goal in being able to have the planning commission public hearing packet posted by the end of day Wednesday.
How do you do that if we still have major questions about financial assurances?
I believe the question for council this evening then is, does council want to push this matter further to discuss financial assurances?
I'd like to make a motion.
We'll do that during administrative council business.
Thank you.
Anything else you'd like to add during this? Any other council members wish to make comments? Seeing none, as I said, we'll take this up during administrative council business. Thank you all for the report. Very informative. Appreciate all the inclusion of the information and continue to do a good job. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes items that are routine, procedural, informational, self-explanatory, and non-controversial. They are presented to council for a single motion and vote. Any member of council may ask to remove specific item for further discussion and a separate vote. Tonight, there are 5 items listed under the consent agenda. Does anyone on council wish to remove an item off the consent agenda for further discussion? Seeing no requests, I'm looking for a motion in a second to approve the consent agenda. Mayor Pro Tem.
I motion to approve the consent agenda.
Councilwoman Grimes.
Second the motion.
Have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem. Seeing no discussion, will the city clerk read the titles and take a roll call vote?
Minutes of July 6, 2020, minutes of July 20th, 2020, ordinance 2284, and ordinance amending the 2020 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by transferring $203,500 from the lottery fund to the CIPP fund for costs associated with the Adams County School District 14 elementary gymnasium improvements and authorization of the expenditure thereof, Resolution 2020-58, resolution appointing members to designated boards and commissions of Commerce City and extending terms of certain board and commission members due to COVID-19, Resolution 2020-59, resolution regarding the naming of the inclusive play structure at Veterans Memorial Park. Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
Passes unanimously 9-0.
Thank you. Next on the agenda are resolutions and public hearing. Tonight's public hearing will be a consolidated hearing for the Second Creek Village Amendment Number 5 subdivision and the related transfer of city property. I remind council to use the public hearing only to ask questions, but not to express opinions or indicate how you will vote. Council members are not to provide testimony if they wish to participate in the decision. To rely only on facts developed in the hearing and in the record and apply those facts to the criteria in the Land Development Code. This time I will open the public hearing and invite Steve Timms, Planning Manager, to make the presentation.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of council. The next two items tonight, as you alluded to, will be heard together. It's a subdivision case S752-20, and then it's also a transfer and a conveyance of a city property. So Mr. Gibson, if you would pull up the PowerPoint, please. And this particular property is on the northeast corner of 104th and Chambers, and all information pertinent to the notice and publication is on the record. Next slide, please. So the applicant's request tonight, they are asking to replat Tract A of the Second Creek Village subdivision into 3 different commercial lots and 1 drainage lot. And of those 3 lots, Lot 1 will include the addition of a 0.77 acre area that's currently within the floodplain under city ownership. And then the ownership as part of the resolution is to be conveyed or transferred to the applicant via city council resolution. And then this 0.77 acre area will allow future signalized vehicular access to the overall commercial development from Chambers and give direct access to these 3 lots as well. Next slide, please. So traditionally, most of our subdivisions are administrative, but this one is coming before you tonight due to the conveyance and transfer of land. But just as a refresher for council, so a subdivision, it is the act of dividing and consolidating or reconfiguring property boundaries and updating associated legal descriptions. And this is important to know. So a subdivision deals with the lot lines. It is not involved the zoning or the underlying uses. So this area is zoned commercial, and those uses are still at play here. So there would be no changes to the underlying commercial uses with this subdivision. Next slide, please. So this just shows the site and surroundings again on the northeast corner of 104th and Chambers. The area, you'll see the Reunion area directly across Chambers, all the Second Creek floodplain to the north, and then the commercial. This is a little bit of an old aerial. A lot's occurred there over the past year, but development, we'll see on the next slide, shows a little bit clearer. Next slide, please. So here you'll see an aerial with some of the development now that's transpired, and we're looking at the northern part there of that particular development. Next slide, please. So in the comprehensive plan of the city, just everything on this corner in all 4 directions is classified as a community commercial center for future commercial uses. Next slide, please. So a little background and history. This property was annexed back in 2002, and it was zoned PUD to allow for commercial uses. Basically, starting in 2017, the overall development was subdivided into 3 different tracts. one north of the floodplain for single-family residential, the Second Creek floodplain in the middle, and then the commercial in the southern part. And at that time, the floodplain area was dedicated to the city by the original owner, and the city did not pay for that floodplain. It was a strict dedication from the developer or from the applicant. Now, since that time, Thompson Thrift then has bought that corner, and they've done several plats, 2018 and 2019, and that created the subject tract A, and then all those commercial lots that are now in use south of this site. Next slide, please. So in terms of the conveyance, again, this will be lot 1. It'll be a 0.77 acre of the floodplain. The floodplain area in its entirety makes up 30 acres. So this is obviously a small, very small section of the overall floodplain. It will line up with the future access along the west side of Chambers. So as Reunion and Oakwood is planning their active adult development on the other side of Chambers, and they're going to have a connection and an entrance, one of several at 106th Avenue. And then, of course, in order to convey city-owned land, City Council is required to approve that conveyance. Next slide. In terms of the subdivision, so again, the replat will create 3 new commercial lots. This will be the final, I guess, create the build out, if you will, of that Second Creek Marketplace. All 3 of the lots have been reviewed against the minimum requirements, and all 3 of those lots and frontages do meet them, exceed the minimum requirements. And then they'll all be accessed via a series of private drives in the development. Next slide, please. So here on the proposed plat in the dark black there, you'll see the 3 lots with the drainage area, but the area in red then would make up part of the lot 1. And then the area to the south are those lots that have already been platted under previous subdivisions. Next slide, please. This is the overall concept plan. It's modified slightly, but it shows you again that northern part there with that future signal at 106th Avenue, how that there'll be a access road that goes around that north site and then connects with those other sites in the middle. So that's why this is kind of important for that most northern lot, but also for the entire connectivity for the development. Next slide, please. This right here just shows how it'll line up with the connection over to Reunion on the future 106th Avenue. That little stub there north of the Platte Valley Medical Center, that little piece is already platted. It was platted back when we did that King Supers. And so it'll line up very nicely with that access to create a signal, and then be further down a little bit north of that, then there'll be a new underpass for pedestrians and bicyclists, et cetera. Next slide, please. So in terms of the development process, after this step, then the development of that lot, all 3 lots actually would occur in conformance with the LDC and the zoning. There would have to be a floodplain development permit required. No portion of the building would be allowed within that floodplain boundary. And then they also have to do a CLOMAR-LOMAR, which is a conditional letter of map revision and a letter of map revision that's handled through FEMA. And that requires the federal approval to raise a portion of that property out of the floodplain. So you'd basically bring some fill in and raise it up to standards that are associated with the property to the south. Next slide, please. As part of the CLOMAR and LOMAR process, that includes review by local and state and federal authorities to make sure that, number one, it will not impact the floodplain boundaries of Second Creek. It won't cause disruptions in stream flow, and then it won't lead to buildup of debris or sediment in other areas. So those are all some of the items that they look at when you take property out of a floodplain. And then as part of it, you'll saw that on the concept plan, but the applicant user would be use that area for vehicular access and drive aisles and minor site improvements, but no buildings. Next slide, please. In terms of the Planning Commission analysis, they did feel like the general layout does accomplish the purposes and intent of the Land Development Code, does meet engineering, traffic, and drainage requirements. It does create lots that are in conformance with the PUD. It does help to build out future commercial uses that are needed by the community, and does help to build a strong partnership between the city and the commercial developer. That will also help with future traffic flow along Chambers, including aligning access points to the west. It will not impact any existing or future pedestrian trails. So the future pedestrian trail along Second Creek that will go under Chambers will not be impacted by this. And then the land that would be conveyed is not currently utilized nor planned for utilization with the city. Next slide, please. In terms of the public notification, the mailing, the publication, and the signs were done in accordance with the Land Development Code. Next slide, please. When this packet was put together, staff received no requests for additional information or objections. As of today, staff has not received any requests or objections to the request either. So next slide, please. And then we did take this to Planning Commission last month on the 21st of July. They did have a public hearing and voted 5-0 to forward this request to City Council with a recommendation of approval. Next slide, please. And with that, that concludes staff's presentation. The applicant is here if as well, if council has any questions for staff or the applicant.
Are there any questions for staff on this item? Councilwoman Noble.
Thank you, Mr. Timms, for the presentation. My question has to do with the ingress and egress on Chambers Road. There is already a road that comes out of King Soopers and goes directly across. That would like drive you straight into State House. And this doesn't seem that far away. It didn't show on the drawing that was in our packet, but it is an existing road, and I'm and it's very difficult for people now getting out of King Soopers at times. So I'm curious about these two roads being close together. If you can explain from a planning point of view why it makes sense.
Sure. So the important thing, and that particular access that you're referring to would remain, and then the access that's currently into this other development on the east side would remain. What's going to be important, though, about this new access to the north, and it'll be about 500 feet difference between the two, and this traffic signal will be about just under 1,000 feet from the Chambers intersection. But the importance will be that that traffic signal will also connect to the King Soopers development. It'll connect 106, and you'll be able to turn left or south, and then go into the King Soopers development that way. But basically, this will provide a signalized access point for citizens, especially those that are coming south on Chambers that want to turn left into the development, or those that are going north on Chambers that want to turn left into the King Soopers, to give them perhaps a better protected intersection of the signalization.
So are you saying there's going to be a new entryway into the Reunion Marketplace commercial project?
There'll be an additional, so 106th Avenue, just to the west of the Platte Valley Medical Center. I believe that little access road kind of stubs out right there. And so that will connect to 106th, providing then a signalized entry point into that commercial development from Chambers. Yes, ma'am.
That's a good idea. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, would the applicant like to speak?
No, I just want to appreciate everybody. Staff has done a great job working with us and preparing this and putting it together. It's been a few months now and working through this. I appreciate everything they've done. If I'm here for any additional questions, but other than that, that's it.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, I'd like clerk to recognize any persons registered to speak on this matter. I see Steve Douglas is registered. Would you please unmute him so that he can speak?
Steve, you should be able to unmute yourself and provide your testimony.
Okay. Thank you, staff and city council, mayor. This is Steve Douglas, 10970 Unity Parkway. Questions I have, this is in addition to what we don't currently have and the built out of the commercial areas. Looks good on paper. but the area that they want to extend, and it does say that no portion of the building be located within the floodplain boundary, but the parking lot will. I understand they want to bring landfill in and level that out. We had the same concerns years ago with rec center being built in the floodplain, so that portion got moved over. I'm more concerned on how close it is to the existing quality pond. And then there's gonna be retention pond there. And the way that land flows, it flows course towards the stream, tributary towards the stream. So it's a downward trajectory, which is, it's flowing north. And so we haven't had a lot of, we've had rain, but that facility is not fully built out commercial wise. So you don't have a lot of hard surface. And that's going to have a lot of water to flow, and that retention pond may be able to hold all that. I mean, it's a 100-year floodplain area. That's one concern. The other concern is a double full, actually 3 full intersections. You have Chambers and 104th. You have the right behind Les Schwab's tires in the hospital there, that coming out of King Soopers. That's a full moving intersection. And then you're going to have one 500 feet from there. That's a nightmare. 106 is not something that's built for King Soopers traffic. That's going to be for a development for the residential traffic, not King Soopers. It should be right in, right out on both sides to alleviate that. Plus, you're thinking about further up the road, you may have a full intersection with Heartland, and then you're going to have on 104th and Chambers and 112th. So that's a lot of lights on Chambers. Plus, if this landowner is going to, if the city's going to do a quick deed to the owner, because like I said, it's been explained, which I appreciate, that city it didn't cost them anything. So it's just pretty much extending the favor to the present owner, that Chambers has to be widened before any projects moving forward happens, because what's going to happen is the project's going to finish. Chambers is going to sit there as a single lanes, not widen, and we're going to have more issues. So I think we need to plan for the future now and not wait until the project is done and then expand the road. So those are the things that I have questions on. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, did any written comments get submitted for this matter?
Mayor Huseman, no written comments were submitted for this item by the deadline.
Thank you very much. This time I will close the public hearing. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing no discussion, I'm looking for a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2020-56 regarding the transfer of property. Mayor Pro Tem.
Motion to adopt resolution 2020-56 regarding the transfer of property.
Councilman Hurst.
I second that.
Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing no requests for discussion, I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2020-56 regarding the transfer of property. We'll take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Madera.
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes.
Councilmember Noble.
Yes.
Councilmember Wardiola.
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank.
Yes.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
Passes unanimously 9-0.
Thank you. This time I'm looking for a motion and a second to accept the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission on case S-752-20. Mayor Pro Tem.
Motion to accept the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission on case S-752-20.
Councilman Madera.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to accept the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission on case S-752-20. Is there any discussion? Councilwoman Noble?
Yes, thank you very much. I think that Steve Douglas made some very good points, and I wondered how they could potentially be incorporated. I think that was what I was trying to talk about also. I know it was what I was trying to say regarding the in and out on King Supers and State House, and then a light, and then of course taking into consideration this Heartland and then Chambers and 104th. That is a lot of craziness, and I'm concerned about the traffic circulation and the inconvenience for drivers. And then as was also pointed out, that the road isn't yet widened there. So how do we incorporate all of that? Is that even possible?
Mr. Timms, would you like to address that?
And may I ask, just for clarification, is the council currently considering the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission or the approval of the resolution?
Right now we're on findings and recommendations.
Okay. So it's fine to address now and talk about now, but the actual, any changes the council would make would come at the time on the approval of the subdivision. Thank you.
Sure. So I'll take a first shot. So I know that the city has contracted with a design team to look at the future design of Chambers from 104th up through 112th. And that design is now finished. And I know that they look at all the intersections and the what potentially could be signalized and what could go at a full movement or right in, right out, 3/4, et cetera. And so that is done according to the city engineer. At this time, there is, I don't believe, any funding identified for Chambers widening at this time. But the applicant for Thompson Thrift, this applicant has received a copy and has been in coordination with our engineering department, as has Oakwood, to help make sure that all of their issues were coordinated in a master plan, thoughtful way for that mile stretch.
Councilman Hurst.
Yeah, on that discussion, I think the permitting process for the floodplain will do a lot of work that's concerned about the drainage. That's talking about the drainage, so north flow and the 100-year flow floodplain. So I have confidence in that process that it's being looked at 3 different levels to consider those drainage patterns and what it can handle and how big of a retention pond you would need, and then to keep the flow going. At the new development there, they have extended the, I wouldn't call it a passing lane, but kind of the merge lane as you're turning northbound off of 104th if you were going westbound. They've extended that, and I think it's like a rough estimate, but I think they would need to extend it by 200 to 250 feet just to make this intersection at 106 make sense. To have a right turn lane to keep the flow so you don't stop traffic in a single lane at the stoplight. So to me, that seems like it should be part of the plan. I haven't seen that plan, so I'm not going to say it's not. But I do agree with that concern that the traffic engineer will be able to ultimately determine if center divide is required there, so you can have right turn in, right turn out, and you would block the ability to be able to make a left turn out of that situation where you're coming out of King Supers and have the option to go straight into that new commercial development, go right onto Chambers or go left onto Chambers. I believe, through appropriate studies, there might actually need to be a concrete divide there that prevents that. So I think those studies consider all of those things and still does have potential to happen.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to accept the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission on case S-752-20. Seeing no other requests for discussion, we'll take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas, Councilmember Alan Thomas, All right. Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank, Mayor Huseman,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
No.
I didn't catch your vote. I apologize.
Thanks.
That passes unanimously 9-0.
Thank you. Now we're on to the adoption of resolution 2020-50. Is there any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem? Is there any discussion on resolution 2020-50? Seeing no request for discussion, I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve, to adopt resolution 2020-50. Mayor Pro Tem?
Motion to adopt resolution 2020-50.
Councilwoman Alan Thomas?
I second the motion.
Thank you. One last time, is there any discussion? Seeing none, I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2020-50. Will the city clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Resolution 2020-50, resolution approving the Second Creek Village Amendment Number 5 subdivision. Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
Passes unanimously 9-0.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, the resolutions. First up is resolution 2020-52, purchase of property at South Platte Crossing. This resolution was continued from the July 2020 meeting. Mr. Smith, would you please provide an update on the resolution?
Yes, good evening once again, Mayor and Council. Troy Smith, Deputy City Manager. Council heard this matter on the 20th of July and discussed the terms of the agreement for the purchase and sale of a floor within the South Platte Crossing building. Council directed staff to attempt to renegotiate the terms of the purchase with the Urban Land Conservancy to include an extension of the closing date to 180 days. Staff has been able to secure an additional 30 days for a total of 135 days within the agreement from the execution of the purchase and sale agreement. If the council wishes to proceed with the purchase of the property, council could pass the resolution and staff will revise the purchase and sale agreement prior to its execution with these additional terms in it. Additionally, I have Mark Marshall, ULC's Director of Real Estate, present this evening, and he would like to address the council with respect to this purchase.
Mr. Smith, I'm moving Mr. Marshall over as a panelist now.
Thank you.
Mr. Marshall, you should be able to unmute your microphone and go ahead and speak.
Good afternoon. Am I live now?
Yes, Mark, you are. We can hear you just fine.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Troy. Thank you, Council, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank everybody for your support thus far here. Just a quick background. ULC was invited by the City of Commerce City to take a look at properties in the city to do the type of work that we do, which is providing a space for affordable offices and businesses to operate, nonprofit, small businesses. We identified the Adams County Human Services building prior to their departure and negotiated with them and purchased the building once they had left. Our main goal when we purchased this property was to look at how do we fill this void that is being made with Adams County leaving the 72nd and Colorado location and moving up to 120th and Pecos? And we always viewed this building to be a community hub that would support nonprofits in the area. We lost some of those nonprofits that we were hoping to gain, moved up and actually are officing out of the new building now. But we know that this area of town remains the biggest area and most critical area for need for services. And I am asking for our appeal here for the council to consider or reconsider the 180 days here to a shorter time. This is a period now that we are going through a historic period now with COVID. And the number of evictions we're about to see that start happening, the number of unemployment slips that are going to be passed out here, the expiration of PPP over most recently here over the last weekend here. There are a lot of needs for services that are paramount right now. And I don't think there could be more critical of a need for the services. We would like to ask if the council would consider faster closing time here. I know we've got a group of about 4 or 5 nonprofits that are interested in moving into the space, service groups here, Early Childhood Partnership, Kind Dental, Kids First Dentistry. These are groups that are primed and ready to start delivering their services. And for us, it would be ideal to be able to locate these services in one building, because as community residents in Commerce City start seeing the need, and I'm sure a lot of them are seeing the need now for services, if we could move more rapidly to be able to provide these services out of one building, I think it would be greatly beneficial. And additionally, from our side, we've owned the building for a year and a half now, and it has not been filled. And we've lost considerable amount of money in the building here on just the operating cost here of holding the cost without it being leased up. So I'd like to make a appeal to the partnership that we've created and move toward when we initially signed the agreement made the agreement with Commerce City to locate and find a building to operate from in the city. So with that, I would like to turn it back over to Mr. Smith. Thank you, Troy.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. And if you could stay around, maybe just unmuted in case the council has some specific questions about the facility that you may be able to answer better than I would appreciate that. At this time, Maura, I would ask if there are any questions relative to the facility or the negotiations for the purchase and sale agreement.
Councilwoman Noble.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a great location and wonderful that it would be by light rail. I have some questions that have arisen since we first voted on this. One of them, well, they all have to do, 2 of them have to do with people who have been in this building before. So it's important to know from our point of view, what the, again, what the shared maintenance cost would be, since we are 1/7 of the building. We would be taking 1/7 of it. What has been done regarding deferred maintenance? My understanding is the elevator breaks frequently. So that really matters then what our portion of maintenance will be. And then also if there's anything, I didn't notice anything in the resolution about an inspection and having our own inspectors look at the property before this is finalized. So if we could have some information on those 3 items, that would be helpful.
I'd be happy to jump in and mention a couple items about the process. The agreement provides for a standard diligence period that would include a facilities inspection to the extent the city wanted to go through that, as well as document inspection. We would go through the the condo association amendment process there to negotiate that and see what it would be. I don't have dollar figures, but all those items that would ultimately determine whether the city would close on it would occur in, I believe it's 3 months' time to decide before we actually close. Also, in that time, the city's going to have to appropriate money to do this. And if the city chooses not to or does not have it, could ultimately not proceed with the transaction. All we'd be doing with this is deciding to enter the purchase and sale agreement and go forward through that process. If council doesn't want to even entertain that process, is the kind of the choice tonight, though. So I hope that helps. Troy may have more information on costs, though.
I just thank you, Robert. That's a great summary. The only comment I would add is that ULC did full due diligence on this building prior to their purchase, and those documents would become available to us for review after the agreement was signed. During this period of time, we don't have access to those documents, but if the purchase and sale agreement resolution was to be passed by council tonight, then ULC will disclose those documents that they prepared to us, and we can then determine if we need to do a full-blown facility assessment or if we wanted to do anything in that regard. So we have negotiated that with ULC. They've been very willing to do that, and those terms are covered in the agreement.
Councilman Hurst.
Yeah, I've very much been in support of this. But I did have some questions about, some testimony we've heard tonight. And it's exciting that we have options, for providing services pretty immediately for the community if we move forward with this. My one question would be what type of investment, and this may come, during that period, but one of the questions we may need answered is what type of investment do we need to make on the front end to be able to bring in services at pretty quickly to make this building valuable immediately.
Let's say in general, a lot of the building we've had tenants move in, and it's in some spaces it's move-in ready, depending, and that depends on the amount of build out you'd like to have on the property. So I think that would be one of those items you would uncover during your due diligence process as you're talking to the community groups and seeing what the build out need is for each of the groups there. So it's not easy to know right now. I couldn't give you an answer right now, but I think it would depend on working with each of the groups and what their build out needs are. And then, as I mentioned, some spaces are move-in ready.
Councilwoman Allen Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Mark. I had a question. Are the organization that you're speaking about, are those the ones going in your space on the floors that you're trying to find them a home in the Commerce City space? And if so, I think Commerce City should be the one who determines who goes where.
We're more than welcome to have all the tenants, all the nonprofits be on the 5th floor. So they've expressed interest in being in the building. And I know with Commerce City's interest in having a floor and looking to have services there, we are more than happy to have those nonprofit groups occupying the 5th floor.
I would just add to that these are some of the nonprofits that the city was in communication with very early on in this process about a community hub and providing services from the floor that we would own. So you're absolutely right, Ms. Allen Thomas. We would be the ones who would be determining who would be using that space. But some of those folks that Mark has mentioned are nonprofits who are operating in our community, and they believe they would have a bigger impact if they had sufficient space. They just don't have the funding to pay for it. So the city would be assisting them essentially if we decided to turn this into a community hub.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Wadiola.
Thank you. I guess this is a question for staff. Have we looked at, since it's a lot of open space, would we be in charge of creating the walls, the office space, what the needs are, or would prospective tenants like the two we heard from today be in charge of that? If they're doing it, that's fine. If we're doing it, so how much do you think we'd have to set aside to construct the whole floor. We haven't talked about that at all because I believe there's only 2 offices, I think, Troy, and I could be wrong, but that's an added cost that we haven't took in consideration if we have to build this out for those organizations.
So Dylan, while I'm answering, could you pull up the presentation, please, and show the photographs of the interior of the space? So Mr. Guardiola, to answer your question, tenant finish would be the responsibility of the owner. And in that case, it would be the city. We could certainly try to negotiate to have tenants who are wanting to sublease the space do their own tenant finish, but that complicates matters from an access and potentially from a liability standpoint. I would suggest, having been in the space, that any number of these nonprofits could very easily start operating out of what is existing there. This space would likely be far superior to what they currently have access to. And there could be some need to, in the future, to capitalize on some of these open spaces and make more internal cubicle office type environment. But I think for the time being, the idea would be that we would try to get some things going and find out what subtenants' needs might be prior to investing in a large tenant finish inside the facility.
Cool, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
So Troy, I guess where I just get concerned is, so we talk about the $1 million, but then in the presentation that was with our packet tonight, we have no money allocated for the purchase costs, no money allocated for the ongoing costs. And then we're talking build out. And it's like, what I worry about is, can this be something that goes from like $1 million to, oh, well, now we're going to be at like $3 million. I mean, that's a big difference. And we're talking a lot of unknowns, and we have no allocated money for any of this. I mean, I don't know. I'm highly concerned about buying this. I think it would be a great space and a really great opportunity, but we're talking like a lot of these added costs, purchase costs, ongoing costs, build out costs. It's concerning.
So in terms of a funding source, council has a number of potential opportunities if they wanted to proceed with this purchase. You certainly have fund balance that you could use, but you also appropriated money for the purchase of a different piece of property that you now have decided not to move forward with. And I would suggest that that amount of money is still fairly significant and would cover the majority of the purchase price of this property if the council elects to move forward. In terms of major capital investment down the road, again, we'll know more about that after we enter the due diligence period and have an opportunity to review the documents and the assessment that has been done by the ULC. But having been in the facility, I would share with you that I think the condition of this building is quite different than the condition of the previous property that the council was looking at from a maintenance and future capital need type of facility. So I think this is a bit of a more safe purchase from that standpoint. But undoubtedly, as you own your own home, you know there are costs and risks associated with the purchase of any property, and we would be partially responsible for the cost of replacing those systems. And again, back to Ms. Noble's question, how much? Those are things that would be negotiated during this due diligence period in terms of the HOA agreement and what the city's pro rata share of that might be. I did provide you some numbers of what ULC and the county split last year in respect to that, just so you had sort of a benchmark. It would be much less than that, I would anticipate, coming through our negotiations. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
What I add, I'm not sure. I look at it from our standpoint as a landlord and owner of the property. We get cash flow from our leases too. We're not charging market rate. We're charging well below market rate, but I'm not sure if that is the city's plan. But if that is, that would also, I'm sure, be another source of revenue for you.
Councilwoman Ellen Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Troy. I want to ask Troy, approximately, do you know how many nonprofit organizations there are in our city currently?
No, ma'am, I don't have a number for that.
Okay, because my other concern too is what would be the criteria, how we would determine who goes on this floor and who would get to determine that? Because then is that going to come back on city council? I mean, because who's going to get to pick and choose which nonprofit organizations gets that area of the floor?
So in terms of who occupies the structure and uses the space, much like council does with other decisions, you develop a set of criteria that staff then use to implement and make those kinds of decisions. That hasn't been determined yet for this process, but I would suggest that is a potential outcome, that you would define some criteria that then staff would administer in making those decisions on your behalf.
And to supplement that answer, the city council is required by charter to approve leases of city property, I believe, that sort of transfer of city property. So that would be a council decision ultimately.
So if I understood correctly, though, from the presentation tonight, only 2 nonprofit organizations have been reached out to so far.
Those 2 entities have reached out to ULC. Again, the city in 2018 regularly met with a number of nonprofits in preparation for what the council originally directed this purpose for. And those 2 were part of those discussions and were involved in them. Since the city has delayed its purchase of the facility, I think those nonprofits have decided to reach directly out to ULC, knowing they're the property owner, in an attempt to make an arrangement to move into some space in the facility.
All right, thank you.
Councilwoman Noble.
Yes, thank you very much. I spent a number of years during my working career in nonprofit work as a director, and I can assure you that there's nothing better than being in a building with other nonprofits where you're supporting each other and encouraging each other. It's a really great space for that kind of thing. The fact that Human Services left this building, left a big hole for residents on our part of the town, because they have to go all the way over to Pecos and 120th to be able to have some services available here will be good. I'm certain that we will have nonprofits that will come forward. And I love the location and the fact that it's near the light rail. Our 2 speakers earlier during public comment made great points. I don't know if they're expecting to have medical facilities. That, of course, is a different expense. But we're looking at due diligence here. So we don't have to really worry about this at the moment. We have the opportunity to say yes to this. And then we can also wait to see what develops from the property. How much more will it cost us? And what will the maintenance look like? What will the operating costs look like? What will the HOA look like? That will all be determined over the course of that due diligence period, according to both Robert and Troy. So I think we would be in good shape there. I wouldn't worry about it. I was blessed to have a meeting with Cheryl Karstens a couple of weeks ago to talk with her about the budget and the financials. And there's actually $34 million that excludes safe harbor money and operator money that she sets aside, which comes to, oh boy, about 21 million, I guess. So that's the problem that I have talked about previously. And the fact that we don't get a financial report monthly or a budget summary monthly, or whatever you want to call it, puts us in the position of making decisions like this, feeling like we're doing it on the fly because we don't have enough information about what's available in the city's coffers. From my understanding of the time that I spent with Cheryl, and another council member was with me on that call, it would seem that we would have the money. We would be doing something good for Commerce City, and to be able to say that we have this floor would be great. Certainly they can go on any one of the other floors that Urban Land is holding on to, the other three. But I think it's an interesting beachhead for us, and I will continue to support it.
Thank you. This time I'm looking for a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2020-52. Councilman Madera.
Move to approve resolution 2020-52.
Thank you. Councilman Hurst.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2020-52. Is there any discussion? Councilman Hurst.
Apologize. That was up for my second.
Seeing no discussion, I'll ask the city clerk to read the title and take a roll call vote.
Resolution 2020-52, resolution approving an agreement for the purchase of property at South Platte Crossing, 7190 Colorado Boulevard, and providing for related matters. Councilmember Madera.
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
No.
Councilmember Noble.
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola.
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank.
No.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
I have 7 in the affirmative, 2 nays. Passes 7-2.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is resolution 2020-53, the intergovernmental agreement with RTD for public art at the North Metro Rail Line Station. This resolution was continued from the July 20th, 2020 meeting. Would Deputy City Manager Troy Smith please provide an update on the resolution?
Yes, I will. Thank you. Let me bring that document up. Okay, updated information on this item. This item was presented to the City Council on July the 20th. After discussion, Council directed staff to go back to RTD and attempt to implement a solution that would allow the current IGA to continue without modification, and for the selected art piece through the public process to be installed. Council believed that it was important to honor the public process and the selection made. Council provided flexibility to alter some of the material used on the art piece to try to reach a consensus with the RTD. Staff met with RTD and began new negotiations, which developed a possible alternative. Staff will need additional time to continue to explore the possible solution, which I will describe for you here in just a minute. In an effort to have RTD be willing to own the artwork and ongoing maintenance as defined in the current IGA, RTD would be willing to explore changes to the materials proposed by the artist. RTD has agreed to supply the city and the artist with a list of materials that are not acceptable in the current art piece, and provide a list of requirements for the art related to their maintenance standards. The city, RTD, and the selected artist would then need to meet to discuss any proposed changes. Staff has communicated the need to have the art piece remain substantially the same from an appearance standpoint to honor the public selection process. I would now like to recommend to the council to remove this item from the council schedule and continue the matter indefinitely. I will bring it back and reschedule it for the council's consideration once we have executed the process I just described.
Councilwoman Grimes.
Thanks for the update, Troy. I would be happy to make a motion to postpone this indefinitely to provide time for further negotiations.
Thank you, Councilman Madera.
Second that motion.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to continue this item indefinitely to provide staff an opportunity to continue negotiations with RTD. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we'll take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
Passes unanimously, 9-0.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is administrative council business. First item is boards and commissions virtual regular meetings. Will interim city manager please make the presentation?
Thank you, Mayor. Dylan, would you bring up the presentation? Thank you. So at the July 20 meeting, City Council moved and seconded to resume all board and commission meetings virtually. And at that point, we had asked for some time to research the impact and the resources needed. Next slide, please. So the city clerk met with the liaisons for the various boards and commissions, and that was to discuss staff capacity, resources, and feasibility of doing the meetings virtually for the boards and commissions. And they determined that there would need to be 5 additional Zoom webinar licenses for various staff members. Those cost approximately $7,000 per year for the 5. Thank you. Next slide. In addition, the information technology staff and city clerk will need to train the staff liaisons. That's how to set up, prepare, and conduct a virtual meeting. And that's to ensure sufficient public accessibility as well as security. And they anticipate that will take 90 minutes to train each staff member. And then additionally, it'll take staff time to manage the virtual meetings. So it's not like a regular Zoom meeting where you can just have various people invited to the meeting. You also have to provide for the public to be able to access the meeting and participate. So meetings would be scheduled regularly, but what we're suggesting is that meetings would be canceled or postponed if there was a lack of business or if staff resources were not available to conduct a meeting, or if there were technological issues that arose during the meeting or similar type of factors. Next slide, please. Meetings with public hearings need to be broadcast, and those have to be streamed to the public using the city's Channel 8 and website. And that, in addition, takes additional staff time from the Community Relations Division, in addition to IT and City Clerk's office. So the meetings without the public hearings will allow for public participation via Zoom, and the recorded meetings would be available on the city's website following the meeting. Next slide. So our staff recommendation is to continue with board and commission meetings for urgent and critical business, with informal check-ins and meetings taking place until the city is no longer responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we recommend that meetings resume in September, and that would be to allow time to purchase the needed Zoom licenses and conduct the training, as well as notify the board and commission members. Next slide. Are there any questions before you head into discussions?
And Guardiola.
Yeah, Roger. So I guess my question is, you know, you said the public has to access the meeting. So I'm speaking on one of them that myself and Mayor Pro Temp, the Youth Commission, we've never had public access. I mean, there's only 2 council members on there. So I guess my question, or I would love to some clarification of why we couldn't have a simple Zoom meeting and hit record, because I know we've all been in them now, you know, since March. Our students have been in them since March. How is that different? Why would it be different, I guess, to what you guys are recommending on the staff training, the public access? How is that different?
Because all of the meetings are supposed to be open to the public. So even though, you know, those in the past may not have had public participation, they're still supposed to be open. And I would defer to Robert in terms of the legal basis for that. But yeah, all of our meetings are supposed to, you know, have their agenda published and be accessible to the public.
Yes, all advisory committee meetings, as well as regular boards and commissions that have decision-making capacity, are subject to the open meetings law and are required to be open to the public, including electronic communications. That law is silent on pandemics and what we can do in that. And so the system that we've derived over the last, it feels like 30 years now, but over the last 5 months has been to make meetings as publicly accessible as possible, knowing that some people in the community do not have internet access. Some people in the community may not have phones. And there is a risk of leaving people out of that participation. And so while it's hypothetical, as we go down to advisory committee meetings that members of the public never come to, I believe the city and staff has been making efforts to maintain that transparency and recording meetings and making them public, as opposed to broadcasting them live, you know, falls on the less transparent side. Because it's not actually live, but it's there. People can call in over the phone and listen as they go. And that is an option. There's greater risk of offending the open meetings law if we get lax and don't go through that process to make meetings as accessible to people.
I guess I don't know, having been on Zoom since March and been on a webinar with 250 people where they could just call in, making that link and that phone number public with your agenda, I guess I don't see how difficult that would be to hold a commission or a board meeting that doesn't have public comment or it's not a public hearing. I guess for Justin, would that need a license? Would that be the reason we need a license if we're going to have an open meeting like that? Or could we just have that and just have a link? Here's the link to the Zoom. Here's the phone number. Just kind of when you make the Zoom, call in, and then the liaison or one of us could be the moderator to, is that an IT question? Like we can't do that without a license?
Well, there's 2 aspects to what you just asked. One is in terms of the licensure, a license is required to have a meeting that's longer than 40 minutes, as I understand it. I'm not a technological whiz by any means, but that's my understanding. And so for us to have these board and commission liaisons host the meeting, conduct the meeting, they have to have a Zoom license. So that's one part of it. The other part is more of a security question. We've had, not we, but we have read about and heard about other cities that have been basically trolled by people putting all kinds of offensive material up at a meeting. And so again, that's why we have to be a little bit careful to avoid that type of thing, because it has happened to these around us, in fact. So thankfully we have not had that problem. And that's one of the reasons for our caution, is to just make sure we don't become a victim of that type of thing.
Perfect. Thank you, Roger.
Councilwoman Noble.
I happen to have a personal Zoom account. It's $15 a month for as long as anyone wants to talk, for up to 100 people. And I have used it twice for informal senior commission meetings before the city transferred it to themselves, so that those meetings are now arranged by Danila as opposed to me. I am also curious about that. The Zoom situation was quite bad at the early stages, and those things did occur that you described, but now Zoom has cracked down in order to keep people from doing that. So that's helpful, and you can make appointments and sign up. But regarding the amount of money, this is for City Attorney Sheasley. My understanding is that because these meetings would have to occur due to COVID, that we could potentially make this a CARES Act expense.
Yes. I believe all of our other Zoom licensure has been a CARES Act expense.
Okay, so the money part of this is taken care of no matter what. I really, 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 really believe that it's important to have democracy in action and have our volunteers back in action again and have them involved in the city. I can't think of anything better than that, because they will just drift away and then we'll start all over again with boards and commissions. They are our ambassadors, and the more contact that they have with each other and with city council members and staff who are their liaisons, the better it is for Commerce City as a whole. We could drift along like this for a long while without having engagement. So it would be really important to have it occur. I know some cities began their meetings last month, so hopefully we can get this up and running very quickly. Thank you.
Councilwoman Grimes.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm also looking for a little clarification on why $7,000 for 5 additional licenses. I'm looking at the Zoom website right now, and much like Ms. Noble, I had an account set up for my work, which was a smaller personal account. However, you can get up to 100 hosts for $2,000 a month. So I'm just interested to know where the 5 licenses costing $7,000 is coming from.
I would like to call on Justin Bingham. He certainly knows far more about this than I do. So
thanks, Roger.
Sure.
Yes, thank you, Roger. I'll address that specifically. So Zoom has different licensing, of course. There's the personal, there's the business. Business has a few more security features, but specifically talking about the 2 product lines of Zoom meetings and Zoom webinars, I'm not comfortable using Zoom meetings for a public meeting. The security in Zoom webinar, as far as having attendees and panelists, and the different security features that Zoom has implemented, is much stricter in the Zoom webinar. Zoom meetings, I feel like if we try to do a public meeting using Zoom meeting versus Zoom webinar, we could be more susceptible to Zoom bombing and some of the things that have happened to other cities. So for those reasons, for the security features that Zoom offers, it is definitely my recommendation to move forward with Zoom webinars for any public meetings.
And those licenses cost significantly more?
They do, correct.
Thank you.
Anybody wish to make a motion? Councilwoman Grimes.
I move that we proceed forward with procuring additional licenses to be paid for by CARES Act funding in an effort to resume all of our meetings.
Councilwoman Noble.
I'll second that.
A motion and a second to procure more Zoom licenses for the purpose of restoring our boards and commission meetings. Councilman Wadiola.
Yeah, I just, if we could also do some check-ins, because some of the boards and commissions, we haven't had any check-ins. So I agree with Councilwoman Noble. We're going to be losing folks. And, you know, check-in could mean a lot of things. So thank you.
Seeing no other discussion, we'll take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Allen Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Wardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
Passes unanimously 9-0.
Thank you, sir. Next on the agenda is city manager recruitment. The city council has received 13 proposals from executive search firms, and the HR department has recommended that council score proposals. Does any council member have questions about the proposals or process, or expect difficulty in completing them this week? Councilman Wadiola?
When are we gonna? When is the deadline? I guess because I'm halfway through all the presentations or the proposals.
The deadline is what you as a council set.
Okay. What's a good date to have them all done? Because I can get them done.
Plan on August 10th being done?
Perfect.
Anybody have objections with that? All right. Please return all your score sheets by August 10th. Let's go noon August 10th. That way, Mr. Wadiola has an opportunity to grade them and report back on Monday evening what our final is. Will that work?
Yep.
Yes,
that
thank
works.
you.
Yeah, the other Mr. Wadiola.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other council members have administrative business they'd like to bring up? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, so I've been kind of doing some research and looking at some other cities, and I would like to see if it would be possible to implement like a diversity and inclusion either commission or task force or something to look at the city's overall diversity and inclusion. I did reach out to our HR director, and we currently don't have anything like that for residents. We don't really have programs or anything like that for residents. And so I would like to see if we could, I mean, maybe it starts with a task force to see what that overall looks like. But there's an organization called, I think it's GARE. I'm trying to load it right now, but it's the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. And it seems like it offers a lot of support for cities to come up with those types of programs. And so I guess I would like to see if we can do something more with this.
Are you making a motion to ask staff to draft a resolution for the establishment?
Yeah, I think I would like to make a motion to see if we can have a diversity and inclusion commission.
So your motion is to have staff draft a resolution for the establishment of a diversity and inclusivity commission?
Yes.
Thank you. Have a motion on the floor for a staff to draft a resolution for the establishment of a diversity and inclusion commission. Looking for a second on that. Please raise your physical hand if you want to second that one, since everybody has their virtual hands up. Councilwoman Noble, you were first.
Yes, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second for staff to draft a resolution for the establishment of a diversity and inclusion commission. Is there any discussion? If you wish to do discussion, please raise your physical hand so I can see you. Councilman Hurst.
Only discussion I'd have, it's not necessarily against this commission, would be understanding staff's needs to be able to support an additional commission. I know each time we bring on a new one, we're putting additional strains on the support staff that goes with that. So although I think this is a great idea, do we need to evaluate our overall staff commitment to boards and commissions to see if we can balance that with our current staffing levels?
Mr. Tinklenberg, can you speak to the capacity of staff to handle a commission if this is approved by the council?
We'll have to do some consultation internally. The other concern that you may want to be aware of is for the military commission, we only received 4 applications. So, we're tapping the pool of citizens. So if you have thoughts, that would help.
Thank you. So as part of the resolution that comes back, you could also provide an impact on the staff for us?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you. I have a motion. Is there any other discussion? If so, please raise your physical hand so I can see you. Seeing no other discussion, we'll take a roll call vote on the motion and second to have staff draft a resolution for the establishment of a diversity and inclusivity commission.
Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Wardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
Passes unanimously, 9-0.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, did you have anything else to bring up during administrative council business?
No, not at this time.
Thank you. Councilwoman Grimes?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was just wanted to ask a question to staff about the Mile High Flea Market. I happened to drive by there on Sunday, and the crowds are large. And it's concerning to me that we have to have these, we have to make a motion to put our commissions and boards back into action when we could probably work on some way to socially distance that number of people. But we have things happening in the city like the flea market with exceptional amounts of people being present. And so I was just curious if we've received any complaints about the flea market being open. Has there been any response to the number of people? Just some feedback on that would be really great, because we're really hindering a lot of our other pieces of life while we're, to try to maintain social distancing where we maybe could do it. However, things that are just happening in the public seem to be going unattended with a blind eye being turned.
We received a number of complaints regarding noise, and that was when they were holding these various musical shows that they had. Some people called them raves, I'm not sure. But I have not received complaints regarding the number of people who have gathered. I would need to see if the police chief has received any. I'm not sure of that.
Yes, Roger, thank you. We did receive at least 2 complaints that were related to social distancing and violations of the governor's health orders and or Tri-County's health orders. Both of those were referred back to Tri-County for investigation. On both of those occasions, we've met with the management at Mile High. They've been very amicable to work with us, and we have not received any further complaints.
Just seems strange to me that they can just host large numbers of people. The parking lot was full on Sunday, so just a frustration, I guess. If the complaints keep coming, will they receive a cease and desist? What happens?
I believe that any punitive action would take case that Tri-County Health would be in charge of that. Okay. What I'll do is I'll follow up with them tomorrow and see what happened with the other 2 complaints that we referred to them, how they were investigated and what their outcome was. Hopefully that'll provide some substance.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief.
Councilwoman Noble.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it concerns me too, Councilmember Grimes. So I appreciate you bringing that up. First of all, I'd like to thank Cheryl Karstens for meeting with us and for Roger arranging it, making it possible to discuss the budget and the financial situation in the city. And if anyone hasn't done that, I really recommend it before we begin the budget retreat. Or maybe we could even have a study session where we go through it. We are actually a pretty young council with members who've only been on for 2.5 years, and the rest of us for about a half a year, a little more than half a year. So it could be potentially a lot of help. Thank you very much. I also want to thank Roger and Brent Sonderland on the 112th project that had gotten tricky because of the impact on the residents who live in the Greens. But I think that we were able to come to a resolution with the engineers and with the Reunion Metro District, and things are moving forward now. So that's good. And it's happily, paving will be finished the week of August 10th. So that will be a heck of a lot better. I have gotten many emails from residents of Outlook because they had gotten word that a cannabis store was planned for their area at 120th and Chambers. There was an inquiry according to the city, but it was not pursued by the person who made the inquiry. But it raised the question of where cannabis stores can go. I spoke with a couple of council members who voted on this previously, before those of us who are new came on board, who were under the impression that a cannabis store might not be allowed in a commercial area and would only be in industrial areas. So 120th and Chambers is pretty densely populated. Outlook residents don't live too far away. There is a process. I sent information to all of them about the process, and I thank Roger for helping arrange that so I could have a clear understanding about where these are allowed. So it might be something that I think we need to take another look at because it could potentially be allowed there by Santiago's restaurant. Also on DIA, the noise issue question remains because it got pretty exciting over the past few days again. And I was told that when we have a development proposal that is in the area of Denver International Airport's plans, that DIA is contacted. DIA then makes comments to our community development office. And I wondered if that process is followed, and if that process was followed on the Legato development project, for example.
Mr. Rogers, are you available?
I am, Roger. Thank you very much, Councilmember Noble. I don't have all of the specific details of referral comments at my hands, but I will be able to get that information to you with what we receive, if anything, from DI with response to Legato.
That would be great. One of their runways that are proposed runs east-west and flies directly between 96 and 88, where Legato is. That is a problem waiting to happen. And the takeoff point is not very far east from 470. Thank you very much for looking into that, because the folks were under the impression that not only did community development get it, but that the city council gets it as well and the planning commission when we are making our decisions. And I didn't recall receiving it, so I appreciate knowing more on that. Regarding study sessions, I brought this up earlier, and it's my understanding that it's a council policy that there aren't minutes at study sessions, but we could ask for informal summaries following a study session. So I think it would be worthwhile to have an informal summary, particularly since we're tackling several topics in one study session at a time now. I take notes, but it depends on how we all see it. So it would be good to have an informal summary. So I would like to make a motion that the staff provides us with informal summaries following each study session.
Have a motion for staff to provide informal summaries following a study session. Is there a second? If so, please raise your physical hand so I can see it. Councilman Wadiola.
I'll second that. I think it's a good idea. A couple residents have reached out to me and asked what we discussed. They couldn't watch them for some reason, and I think it'd be easier just send them an email instead of minutes, but just a light summary. So I would support that. Second it.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second for a summary of study sessions to be provided. Is there any discussion? Again, please use your physical hand in the window so I can see it. Councilman Madera.
Yeah, so my question is, who would write these summaries? And then, what's a light summary, right? Because the light summary to me might just be the agenda that we had for the study session, whereas to someone else, it means something completely different. And, it's, so these are meant to be working sessions, and a lot of times we have discussions and then, I guess people forget or what have you, and they come back and, the next meeting they're saying, well, we decided on this, which I guess wasn't the case. So is that what we're trying to get is, whenever there's a question for consensus or direction, the direction that the majority of council wrote, or, because I guess one is just staff time, and then who's going to be in charge of it? Is it going to be whoever was presenting, or do we hire a court, scribe for this thing? Does Dylan have to take notes for all these now, or, so I would just like a little clarification on that.
Well, I would like to see exactly as you describe it, really, that if there is a consensus on a particular point that that would be reflected, what the topic was, what the particular consensus was, if we referred something back, if we asked for more information, if we asked for something by a particular deadline. So consensus or direction would be helpful, and staff recommendation.
I just don't want it to be where it's like a single person asking for something, and then that doesn't end up in one of these summaries, and then we end up with a huge discussion over something that one person was talking about, not ending up in these summaries or meeting minutes.
No, not at all. How I envision it, it's kind of what we did for the legislative subcommittee. A couple of those residents asked who and what, why, and I think it's a very easy answer. Boom, 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 and consensus went 5-4. These are the 5. These are the 4. It moved on. But I agree with you, Oscar. It shouldn't take. It's not a huge summary, but it's the main points on why we're moving forward, and I think key deadlines should be in there. But yeah, it shouldn't be so hard. What Jason or Director Rogers sent today, I mean, to me, was all right. I mean, he sent a good summary. So that's how I look at it and envision this. I don't know about Councilwoman Noble.
I think we said the same thing, basically. Councilmember Guardiola.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I have a motion and a second. Councilwoman Grimes.
Yeah, just one thought. I'm in support of some sort of summary, but I think someone correct me if I'm wrong, but we can't formally vote in a study session, and so I would just worry about putting down kind of consensus numbers, 5-4, as part of a summary that might be misinterpreted as a vote.
I mean, I think if we say 5-4 and moved on with council direction, we're not formally voting, but I think the residents should know that 5 of us, and it doesn't have to have our names, but 5 of us said yes on this, and that's why it's moving forward. Um,
I absolutely agree. I think maybe, I appreciate your feedback, Councilman Mordiola. I think maybe the question is more for Robert, just is there any kind of legal issue with kind of noting a direction in terms of numbers?
I think as long as we can phrase it in a way that wouldn't do that, I think generally just referring to the consensus of council on a particular issue. I mean, for a lot of these, for oil and gas would be a huge list. I mean, not a huge list, but it would be a lot. But for a single item issue, it would be council's consensus was to support this name of a park sort of thing. The actual action is going to occur later. So I would just say be gracious with the inclusion of numbers or not. I think with discipline, some councils in the past have tried to approve things at study sessions in a way and expect that to happen, really. So as long as we're disciplined, I think we can handle it.
Thanks, Robert.
Any other discussion? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. I'm sorry, Councilman Wadiola.
Hey, Robert, I have a question. Why don't we take minutes at study sessions if we take minutes at every other board and commission and meeting? That's just a question.
Sure, I can only speculate. It's in the council policies that predate me. I believe it is, as Mr. Madera suggested, that study sessions are meant to be informal. Zoom has changed that a little bit. It's meant to create a collective environment, really, where people can speak a little bit more freely, I believe, and not necessarily be held to their prior statements and that sort of thing. And so probably because, but fundamentally, it's because minutes are supposed to include results of formal actions. And there not being any formal actions, there wouldn't be much utility to it. So it may be also that, it may be a resource issue as well.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Madera,
No.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Wardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
Passes 8-1.
Thank you. Councilwoman Noble, you have other items to discuss?
I do have the one question that I had earlier about financial assurance. Robert, can you, I don't know how quite to take care of this problem because I do see it. I am genuinely concerned about how the language is, the text in the draft regulations, and that we may not be able to tackle it again if we don't get it fixed now. And if I'm wrong, then swell, or if the woman with the EPA is wrong, great. But meantime, it is something that is of concern and we should all be concerned about it.
So council could choose to defer action on this until we resolve the issue and look at it further. Council could also choose to see what Planning Commission says about the regulations and then consider it when the ordinance is up for consideration. These things go to Planning Commission for review and recommendation, and we can amend it as council's considering it. Another option is to come back to the ordinance after this one is passed. Not that everybody, I think, wants to come back to oil and gas, but we have to remember all of our ordinances can be changed. And so if we want to come back and amend it after the fact so that we get this up our plate and then add something new, that's also an option. So 3 choices I think might work.
Could you bring it back to us on the 10th and regarding the language and where we are protected and where we might not be?
Well, I believe the language is fairly clear as to when the financial assurances end.
Okay, so it doesn't include reclamation.
Correct. That's from my reading of it, from what I saw. I will clarify that with you tomorrow if I'm wrong, and Mr. Hader And Dominic and Mr. Sura can tell me if it's in there somewhere else.
Is that all you have, Councilwoman? You're on mute.
Councilmember Guardiola has his hand up, I think, to speak on this.
Councilman Wadiola?
Yeah, I think, hearing it out, I'd like more clarification. I think I think our residents shouldn't be on the hook. If that's the clarification, I just want some clarification on what kind of insurance we have with this. So I don't know if we have to, like you said, delay it or something, but I think this is pretty big because if something does happen, our residents are on the hook, the taxpayers are on the hook. And this is a big item that, I just heard about it and don't really understand it. So I wouldn't feel comfortable voting on it. Just saying, oh, we got to get it done. The timeline's already set. Well, I don't think that's right. So whatever options, I think we should really look at it and bend it.
Are either you or Councilwoman Noble making a motion regarding this?
The Planning Commission actually meets tomorrow night.
No.
So on the 11th, it would have been a special meeting of the Planning Commission, I believe. So I would, my motion is to receive clarification and discussion on the financial assurance language in the draft regulations and postpone the Planning Commission, the special Planning Commission meeting until the 18th of August.
If I can clarify just on the motion briefly, I don't know that staff would be able to draft language sufficient to get in front of the Planning Commission, depending on what council's desire as far as a financial guarantee might be. So if you maybe want to leave the date out, that would be helpful.
Robert, if I may offer, I would say if this is the action that council would like to undertake, we would say look at a planning commission on September 1st as our next not necessarily regularly scheduled meeting, but one that we know we would have the ability to be able to get a quorum with our planning commission and have staff resources appropriately scheduled to be able to be at the meeting as well.
Okay, so I'll rephrase my motion and eliminate the date and reference to the Planning Commission. That the motion is to obtain clarification and further discussion on financial assurances in the draft oil and gas regulations for the Land Development Code.
Okay, I have a motion to delay the Planning Commission take up of the Land Development Code amendments for oil and gas.
Wait,
And
I didn't say Planning Commission. I left Planning Commission out.
Okay. Please restate your motion for me.
Okay. My motion is to obtain clarification and further discussion on the financial assurance language in the draft oil and gas ordinance for the Land Development Code.
Okay, and as a result, you want to delay the proceedings from going forward?
Well, I thought that Mr. Sheasley was advising.
No, Mr. Sheasley was advising that you delay it with an open-ended date so that you don't put pressure on staff to have to get it crammed in before a certain date.
Was that what you said, Mr. Sheasley?
That's correct. I think council can safely assume tonight that there is not a financial guarantee, a set dollar amount set in the regulations past while a well is producing to guarantee issues. There is a potential that the city could require it. There is authorization to require it, but there is not a mandate for that. And so we need to, I want to confirm that, but the bigger issue is, does council want to discuss imposing such a requirement? And then if council wants to, we'll need time to draft that.
I'm not a great motion maker. Yes, I want to do that. I don't know how to express it.
I think it could be a motion to consider additional financial guarantees and delay any proceedings on the ordinance until council discusses it further.
Okay, I'll make the motion that Robert Sheasley just made. Did you get that, Mayor Huseman? You're going to make me repeat it.
I think I can paraphrase what the city attorney said. Is there a second for the motion? Councilwoman Grimes?
I would second the motion if Councilmember Noble would be open to a slight amendment. I'd like to include clarity on the overlap of COGCC bonding and more information and clarity on COGCC bonding as it pertains to reclamation.
Yes, I'll accept that amendment.
Then I second.
All right, so I have a motion and a second to postpone all proceedings for the land development code amendments for oil and gas, and to have staff bring back for us clarification on the bonding requirements as well as how they overlap with COGCC requirements for bonding. Is there any discussion, please, Councilman Madera?
Yeah, I just hate derailing, almost 3 years worth of work for one clause, that we've been discussing over all this time. I would really like to see that taken up separately and keep things moving forward, because do you really want to table this indefinitely? Because essentially that's what we're doing here, is we're tabling all the land development codes in regards to oil and gas for this one bonding that does overlap with the COGCC rules. Granted, COGCC bonding may not be sufficient in many people's opinions, but that's something that they're working on their rules as well. So do we really want to stop all the progress that we made? I mean, there's a meeting tomorrow to keep everything else that we've been working on moving forward. Do we really want to stop that and table this discussion, or can we take that up separately and make an amendment to the land development code and keep working on progressing what we have already and what we've already agreed on as a council? So I would like to see this taken up separately. I think it's a valid point, but I don't want to derail the progress that we made to this date.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Please use your physical hand since virtual hands are up. Councilman Hurst.
So I understand the need for some long-term assurance, but I did just want to ask a quick question about conditional use permits. And, it was my understanding, at least how we do it with other businesses, that we have some reclamation assurances in conditional use permits as the conditional use changes back or away from the condition that we are approving. You have to agree to the reclamation assurances in the conditional use permit. I think I've seen that in the past in a couple different situations. Is that not something that we usually address during that approval process?
I'll jump in. Just to say, I assume that reclamation can be addressed at different stages, and whether that whatever the permit may be, we give trail easements and road crossing easements, and people have to remedy those site conditions. I think the question of a financial assurance may be somewhat different. That may not be bonded. Money may not be posted to do that in all cases.
I have nothing further to add to City Attorney Shizzy. He jumped in and was spot on.
Any other discussion on this motion? Councilwoman Noble, I think you were first, and Councilwoman Grimes.
Yes, I just wanted to point out again that the oil and gas draft will not come before the Planning Commission until, was not planned until August 11th. The meeting tomorrow night does not have oil and gas on the agenda.
Thank you. Councilwoman Grimes.
Yeah, Councilmember Madera, point well taken, and really kind of accented my point about an overlap, and I agree we could take this up at a later date, and so I would rescind my second at this time.
I gotta get clarification from the city attorney on that. Is that something that can occur unilaterally, or does council have to approve her rescinding that second?
I would actually have to consult the book on that unless there's somebody there that else that would like to make a second to avoid that. Ms. Allen Thomas may want to do it, so I don't have to look something up.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Councilwoman Allen Thomas.
Yeah, I'll second.
Very good, thank you. So now I have a motion from Councilwoman Noble and a second from Councilwoman Allen Thomas. Is there any other discussion? Seeing no requests, we'll take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Madera,
No.
Councilmember Allen Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Wardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
No.
Councilmember Smith,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
No.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
I have 5 in the affirmative and 4 nays. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Mayor Huseman, may I just clarify? I have looked it up. Once debate begins, seconds don't really matter anymore. So, and the seconder and the motion maker can vote against motions as well. So for the future, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Councilwoman Noble, was that the end of your administrative council business?
Yes, sir, it was.
Thank you. Next on the list is Councilwoman Allen Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank city staff again for working hard and cleaning up the core of our city, but I do have some concerns. I was contacted this week by several constituents with concerns. They have been getting notices about weeds, trash in their yards, and I just think it's really important that city staff continues to set the standards, because a lot of constituents complained that why were they giving warnings when they see the dog track and the ongoing problem with the weeds there. There was also a mattress on the property at the dog track, which I notified city staff. So I just think it's really important. I appreciate the work the city staff is doing, but we have to set the standards and keep our own property maintained as well. And like I said, if I seen the mattress on the dog track property, then I know another city staff member seen that as well. The fencing around the dog track, I got complaints about that as well. And constituents complained to me, well, what about the dog track? And they got a warning about their fence. So I appreciate everyone's help, but like I said, consistency, and we have to set the standards for our residents as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. Councilman Wadiola.
Sorry, Mayor, I just didn't put it down.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Allen Thomas, did you have additional things to add?
Oh, no, that was an accident. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Any other administrative council business? Councilman Hurst.
Yeah, just real quick. I also received a couple phone calls this week. A couple of them were just voicemails that did not request a callback, but they were concerned I think as expected, more people are getting out walking, maybe walking their pets. And one of the concerns that was passed on to us is just the people not cleaning up after their dogs, or I guess other animals potentially. And there were a couple specific locations called out that I don't mind passing on to city staff later. But basically, you know, they were saying, please ensure that there was a couple specific requests to ensure that we are holding people accountable to picking up their dog's mess. Not sure how that's possible unless we visibly, you know, see it or anything like that. But basically, want to make sure we're passing on the word to not only city staff, but just all you know, Commerce City residents that, you know, we're all going through a tough time. Things are a little bit different, but let's try to, you know, take care of our own mess and respect our neighbors by doing so. And you know, the request comes not falling on deaf ears. It's just a very tough one to follow through with, because we're really, you know, expecting our neighbors to do their part in that situation. I think the last thing anybody wants to see is, you know, neighborhood services or the police department out there writing tickets for dog poop. It's just not a confrontation that any of us needs, you know, that we need to be putting our staff in that situation. But let's be honest, it's disgusting if you're walking down the road on a sidewalk and there's poop everywhere. So just more of a comment to bring it up. There's people concerned about that. Just to pass that message along and kind of make that a public, you know, concern of, you know, everybody, please take care of their mess. We know that more people are out walking, and that's fantastic. But in doing so, please make sure that you bring something to clean up after your dog. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other administrative council business? Seeing none, we'll move on to reports. Deputy City Manager, excuse me, Interim City Manager Tinklenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing further from me.
Thank you. Mr. Sheasley.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to note, we've put on the agenda some discussion of the Council Policy Committee that was identified a few weeks ago. I'm meeting with Mr. Guardiola hopefully this week to go through that proposal as requested. And then I inundated your inboxes on Friday with a number of items, so please call me if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council members wishing to make a report? Seeing none, I will give a very brief one. I was contacted by an attorney for the Can-Am Metro District, which is the property at 112th Avenue and 85 that wants to get annexed into the city, asking if they could meet with me in order to discuss my concerns over Metro Districts. I have a Zoom call scheduled with them tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. Mr. Sheasley will be on that call. He cleared the ability for me to have that conversation with them prior to anything coming before council. So just to let you all know that I'll be giving them my concerns. It's concerns they've heard already. The attorney actually was in the North Metro Chamber of Commerce's roundtable on Metro Districts, and where I was vocal about my concerns on Metro Districts. And so she wanted to reach out and see what they can do to make their Metro District fall more in line with what our expectations are for Commerce City. So that call will be tomorrow at 5 p.m. Other than that, I have nothing else to report. Any last alibis before we adjourn? Seeing none, have a good evening, have a good week. See you next week. There being no further business to come before the City of Commerce City, we are adjourned. Thank you and have a good night.